Chapter 1161. By Jie flew over the sea of thunder. White feathers scattered in the air. As far as the eye could see, a brilliant phoenix wing had grown out of the king of feather human king's broken left wing. His body was flowing with light and fire at the same time. His face kept changing, sometimes twisted and ferocious, and sometimes angry and hateful. "Give up. You can never defeat me," the feather human king said. "I'm not going to defeat you. I'm going to kill you, you bastard." Li Fengyuan roared. It was as if a person had been split into two halves and was engaged in a life and death struggle while resisting the heavenly tribulation. However, the king of feather men was the one who bore the brunt of the tribulation thunder. This was because the heavenly tribulation's descent was almost entirely triggered by his powerful aura. Rings of light, which were like endless waves, collided with the tribulation thunder and canceled it out. After all, he was a super expert at the peak of the third heavenly tribulation. Although the heavenly tribulation this time was extremely powerful and affected a lot of people, it was still a third heavenly tribulation in essence. "Your Majesty, if this goes on, the city amongst the clouds won't be able to hold on, and all the winged people will die." Bai Jie shouted, but it was unknown whether her voice could reach the feather human king's ears amidst the deafening thunder. The feather human king seemed to sense something. He suddenly turned around, and the ferocious expression on his face froze. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. This is for the sake of all winged people." Bai Jie took out an exquisite and beautiful crystal dagger. Spiritual light swirled around it. Impressively, it was also a powerful treasure. It was specially used for close combat, and it was a defensive item bestowed to her by the feather human king in the past. She clenched her teeth, stepped forward, and stabbed at the king of winged human king's chest. The king of feather men was startled and closed his eyes. His body trembled. Just as the dagger was about to pierce through his skin, a hand gripped the sharp edge tightly. Bai Jie raised her head in astonishment. Could it be that Li Fengyuan turned from guest to host? The king of feather men suddenly opened his eyes. His left eye was fiery red, and his right eye was azure blue. Both of them revealed the same will. "No, I still want to live." Two faces and two voices overlapped, both filled with the desire to live. At this moment, they reached an agreement. Then he raised his hand and grabbed Bai Jie's neck. "Your Majesty, you are the winged human king." Bai Jie's eyes widened in disbelief, and she couldn't help but recall the past. "I once had the opportunity to ascend, but at that time, Great Xia had just been established, and it was a constant threat to the city amongst the clouds. I am the king of the winged people. Sacrifices must be made." That was why he stayed behind and waited for a new opportunity. "I didn't expect that I would wait for 1,000 years and miss all the opportunities." Sigh. At that time, he sighed. His body seemed to be glowing. He had always been the genius, the hero, and the king of the winged human tribe. No matter what kind of halo he had, it wouldn't be excessive. He had never disappointed anyone, but unexpectedly, now that he thought about it, there seemed to be a hint of bitterness at the corner of his mouth. Was there regret in his heart? Yes, he regretted it. The young man didn't fear death because he didn't understand how terrifying it was. As his lifespan slowly came to an end, his body and soul deteriorated day by day. It was like a giant hole that swallowed all joy, and nothing could fill it. If mortals could use fate to comfort themselves and obtain a psychological balance, he couldn't. If I had chosen to ascend at that time, I would have already embarked on a new journey in the heavenly Tao. This thought continued to linger, but it only increased the pain. Now, he finally saw an opportunity to make up for his regret and start all over again. No matter what, he couldn't let go. I'm sorry. This time, I want to live for myself. Go. The winged human king slowly released his hand. Although he was a little ashamed, he was full of determination. He would devour the phoenix and obtain the new life that he dreamed of. Then he would ascend to the heavenly Tao. Everything in this world would have nothing to do with him. Your Majesty, Bai Jie felt that the power of the tribulation thunder was getting stronger and stronger. If she stayed any longer, she would be in danger of dying. She looked back at the sky full of wind and thunder. How long could the city amongst the clouds last? The dagger in her hand fell. She suddenly spread her wings and arms, and a hazy white light appeared all over her body. The light replaced her torso and limbs, and a white human figure blurred. What are you going to do? The winged human king was shocked. Your Majesty, you taught me to sacrifice. How could you forget it? But you've done enough for the winged human tribe. Now it's my turn. Bai Jie's face was calm. Suddenly, a bright light burst out. A white sun rose in the sky. Wherever the light shone, the rolling thunder was pushed away. The world became quiet. Bai Jie, the winged human king, cried out in alarm. The winged human king's wings were broken, and he was on the verge of collapse. The flesh on his front was almost completely peeled off, and the spark in his chest was exposed. The shock and anger on his face faded, and a trace of confusion appeared. Looking into the distance, the city guarding formation was already on the verge of collapse. Streaks of light flew over from the horizon, and they were all the officials of the king of Donglu's mansion. After a short period of silence, the thunder roared again. The battle between light and fire also stopped. Although light was far superior to fire and had the upper hand, it was difficult to extinguish the spark so easily. Bai Chun was silent for a moment, and suddenly said, "Li Feng Yuan, if we continue to fight, we will definitely perish together." As he spoke, he actually recovered his usual elegance. "Then, let's perish together." Although he wanted to live, he was not afraid of death. After nirvana, Li Feng Yuan had a deeper understanding of the way of life and death. Suddenly, he felt that the strong will that was firmly suppressing him had retreated. Life is better than death, isn't it? Bai Chun muttered to himself, "I have a request. If you are willing to agree, I will not fight with you anymore. You will obtain my power, and you will be able to calmly pass the heavenly tribulation." "What request?" "Protect the city amongst the clouds for me." "What did you say?" Li Feng Yuan was surprised. "I will bear all the sins, and they have never harmed you." As the flame swayed, Li Feng Yuan recalled what he had seen and heard when he was wandering in the city. The white fountain under the sunlight, the beautiful music reverberating in the air, the Featherman children laughing and playing with him in groups, the gentle scolding of their mothers. At that time, he was full of worries and did not take these scenes to heart. But at this moment, they suddenly became clear, and the thunder seemed ethereal. "You are playing tricks again. Still want to shake me? These are all real. Everything is worth it." Bai Chun seemed to be talking to Li Feng Yuan, but also seemed to be talking to himself. Under the continuous bombardment of lightning, Bai Chen's will faded, and the flame quickly rose. "Wait, I haven't promised you yet." Li Feng Yuan restrained the rising flame. "Please protect them. I beg you. Aren't you afraid that I will go back on my word? You are a benevolent phoenix. Humph, if it were my first father, he would definitely not agree to you. Even if I agreed, I was just fooling you." "Thank you," Bai Chun said sincerely. Finally, he opened his palm. There was a pure white feather in it, and he wanted to murmur something. Flame spewed out of his body. It instantly swallowed his body. The white feather drifted. In the raging flame, the wings spread again, and they were already glorious phoenix wings. With a resounding phoenix cry, the phoenix rushed against the lightning and flew into the depths of the tribulation clouds. He actually succeeded. The shadow cloud crane king was surprised. He had originally planned to break through the city amongst the clouds and then deal with the king of feathermen, but he did not expect the phoenix to successfully counterattack. He has helped us eliminate a great disaster. The white dragon king will be here soon, and then he will definitely break through the city. King Donglu said, "What about the feathermen in the city? It will be best if they die in the tribulation lightning." The talent of the mutants was really terrifying, far surpassing that of ordinary humans and demons. The feathermen were even more outstanding among them. They must eliminate any future troubles and slaughter the city and destroy the country. The experts of the feathermen had already given up on pushing the city amongst the clouds, and were fighting with the officials of the king of Donglu's mansion. Their power was interlinked, and they formed a formation, forming a geometric pattern of interweaving light in the sky. However, with the Shadow Cloud Crane King and the king of Donglu holding the line, defeat was only a matter of time, and their king was already gone. After a while, a large ship broke through the sky. The pure white body of the ship was somewhat similar to the Red Dragon King and the Silver Dragon King, but it had the complex cloud patterns of the Cloud State style. It was one of the few siege weapons in the world, the White Dragon King. Still 1,000 miles away, the dragon's mouth had already opened, and specks of light gathered. The light was condensed to the extreme, and a beam of light whistled through the air like the roar of a white dragon. King Donglu raised his head to take a look. Unknowingly, the tribulation clouds had already begun to gather, but it was a pity that it had not been able to completely destroy the city amongst the clouds. However, at the moment, all that was left was this attack. Quickly block it. The experts of the feathermen worked together to form a light barrier, but it was instantly penetrated, and the city amongst the clouds was about to be broken. A bright light flashed in the sky, and the speed was so fast that even the Shadow Cloud Crane King was stunned. Phoenix? It was the Phoenix flying over, and he stepped on the city amongst the clouds with one foot, and his magnificent wings covered the city. The beam of light bombarded his body and scattered into streams of light that filled the sky, but he was not injured at all. A phoenix cry rang out, and a glorious color dyed the heavens. Everyone's gazes were attracted by it, and they stopped what they were doing. As a member of the Feathermen, the Shadow Cloud Crane King was the most moved. Originally, the phoenix had not even passed the tribulation, and he had already developed feelings of admiration for it. Now, it almost turned into reverence, and he bowed down to it. Could this be the legendary 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix? King Donglu gave him a look, and the Shadow Cloud Crane King suddenly came to his senses. He tried his best to calm himself down, and asked, "May I know how I should address you, fellow cultivator?" "Li Feng Yuan, just now. Thank you for your help. Fellow cultivator is the elder of my generation. It is only natural for you to lend a hand. There is no need to be so polite." The Shadow Cloud Crane King quickly declined modestly, and then asked, "What do you mean by this, fellow cultivator?" "I have already promised the Featherman King, by Chun, that I will succeed the position of the Featherman King and protect the city amongst the clouds on his behalf." Li Feng Yuan lowered his head slightly, and his pair of phoenix-like eyes flickered with brilliance. No one knew what he was thinking. "What did you say?" It was not just the Shadow Cloud Crane King. Even the Feathermen were shocked. If not for Li Feng Yuan blocking the White Dragon King's attack just now, they would almost have started scolding him. "Fellow cultivator, you really know how to joke. Didn't Bai Chun die in your hands? Furthermore, you are not a Featherman, so how did you become the Featherman King?" Bai Chun reaped what he sowed, and has already been executed. If not for his repeated requests for the position of the Featherman King, I would not have bothered with it either. However, since I have made a promise, I will naturally fulfill it. I am already very tired today. Fellow cultivators, please leave. Chapter 1162. Fellow, let me give you another piece of advice. You killed and devoured the winged human king. The winged human king will never forget today's enmity. You are raising a tiger and inviting calamity. Wanting to be some winged human king is wishful thinking. The Shadow Cloud Crane King's words were both to sow discord and the real situation. Li Fengyuan's eyes turned. As expected, the winged human powerhouses all had unconcealable hostility on their faces. Bai Chen's position in the hearts of the winged human king was unimaginable to outsiders. Between the tall, white towers in the city amongst the clouds, the winged human looked up in fear. The gorgeous phoenix wings were like a burning cloud, reflecting a magnificent luster. Mother! A winged human child's face was full of fear. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Mother hugged her tightly. When she looked up, her worried eyes met that pair of phoenix eyes. Their names and even their experiences appeared in Li Fengyuan's mind. Right now, he felt a kind of closeness to all the winged human, as if they were his clansmen. He understood that this was the influence of Bai Chen's spiritual memories. He thought to himself, do you want me to have more feelings for them? He could not help but sigh. Bai Chen chose to give up everything at the last moment. Was it a great sacrifice touched by Bai Jie, or was it a helpless action after seeing that he had no hope of survival? Perhaps it was both. Humans were not plants. How could they be emotionless? They lived because of feelings, and they died because of feelings. However, compared to this small emotional burden, the benefits Li Fengyuan obtained were incalculable. Since Bai Chen did not resist at all and allowed him to devour and melt, he practically obtained a complete spiritual inheritance. Among them were Bai Chen's 7,000 years of cultivation, as well as all his power. This power and inheritance was so enormous that it was impossible to digest in a short time. And if they fought to the end, even if he defeated Bai Chen by a fluke and was lucky enough not to be struck to death by the heavenly lightning, he would only be in a state where he had just passed the third heavenly tribulation. Moreover, he would be very weak, not to mention the spiritual inheritance. It was like two armies facing each other. The results were completely different between surrendering and fighting to the last soldier. Seeing Li Fengyuan fall silent, he fell into deep thought. East Lu King smiled slightly. A wise man submits to circumstances, not to mention the divine bird phoenix. And with his army pressing down, how could he allow anyone to stop him? The White Dragon King was at the back, and the high officials were at the front. East Lu King and Shadow Cloud Crane King. They were ready to launch a thunderous strike at any time. This was already a nation war, not a battle of magical powers. Li Fengyuan said, I know how much they like Bai Chen and how much they hate me. It's good that you understand. The Shadowed Cloud Crane King heaved a sigh of relief. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he didn't want to make an enemy of the phoenix. Perhaps this was the instinct of all feathered creatures. However, Li Fengyuan changed the topic. But what does that have to do with me? I'm just doing what I want to do. How can I change because of other people's likes and dislikes? All right, I don't want to be your enemy, but since it has come to this, we can only fight. All winged people, retreat to the city. Hearing Li Fengyuan's order, the winged men powerhouses looked at each other in dismay. Not to mention that they were unwilling to listen to the enemy's orders. There was no one to control the Cloud City's great formation. Wouldn't returning to the city be equivalent to waiting for death? Li Fengyuan did not say much either. He was confident that he could contend against the entire cloud region here, and He was not just relying on his own power. Otherwise, a shadow cloud crane king alone would be able to keep him busy. So how could he protect the city amongst the clouds? Bai Chun had also left him a great gift, and that was the city amongst the clouds. Suddenly, the city amongst the clouds surged with white light. It flowed through every street like a river and gathered at the royal palace in the center of the city. A pillar of light soared into the sky and merged into Li Fengyuan's body, dyeing every one of his wings pure white as if he had turned into a white phoenix. Bai Chun had handed over the control of the entire city amongst the clouds' great formation to him. Just now, he was stalling for time in order to completely control it. The winged men powerhouses looked at each other in dismay. This was an authority that only the winged men kings of each generation could possess. And once they controlled the entire city amongst the clouds, they would practically become the winged men king. They transmitted their thoughts. What do we do now? If we continue to fight, we will all die here. Or should we retreat somewhere else? Shut up. As long as the city lives, we live. If the city dies, we die. If anyone dares to abandon the city and flee, he will be a traitor of the winged men race, and will be punished by heaven and earth, abandoned by both humans and gods. Then we can only return to the city first. This is for the sake of the winged men race. Light flashed continuously, and more than 10 rays of light flew back to the city amongst the clouds. The speed of the winged men's escape light was rarely seen, and no one could stop them in time. Oh no! The East Lu King's expression changed drastically. He had originally wanted to use the city amongst the clouds to delay these winged men powerhouses, and then finally capture them all in one fell swoop. However, he did not expect the cooked duck to fly away. He shouted loudly, "Listen to me! Attack the city with all your might." He activated the Cloud State Cauldron, the East Lu King's golden seal, and even the colorful clouds in the sky, pressing down on the city amongst the clouds. The Cloud Shadow Crane King's crane cry reached the 9 heavens, and the White Dragon King roared angrily. All the great practitioners took out their trump cards, and a torrent of power surged violently. For a moment, it seemed as if it could shake the heavens and the earth. The light barrier of the city amongst the clouds was already extremely thin, and there was no way it could withstand the attack. Li Fengyuan had already expected this. He landed in the city amongst the clouds and transformed into a handsome youth. He said loudly, "Success or failure depends on this. Give me your power." While the other winged men were still hesitating, the body of the mother who was carrying her child was the first to light up. Compared to hatred, she wanted to protect her child. Specks of light lit up in the city, and the bodies of all the winged men, regardless of whether they were strong or weak, glowed with white light. They merged into the whistling river of light and gathered in the main hall of the royal palace. Boom! The city amongst the clouds shook violently, as if it was a lonely boat that had fallen into a surging torrent. The tall towers and palaces collapsed one after another. Li Fengyuan stood above the royal palace and felt an unprecedented power converging on his body. This was the condensation of the winged men's power and spirit. He looked at the horizon with a grave expression. Could he actually block it? The winged men were also looking at him. The surging white light was like a pair of pure white wings that had spread out. It was as if they could see Bai Chen's figure again. Time became extremely slow. Every second was stretched out, and it became a kind of torture. If the great formation was broken, everything would be over. However, that thin layer of light barrier was on the verge of collapse. Although it was on the verge of collapse, it did not shatter. Its toughness was beyond everyone's expectations. A smile appeared on Li Fengyuan's face. With another wave of his hand, the cloud pillars erected around the city amongst the clouds, and in front of the main hall lit up one after another. The bird-headed, human-bodied statues that were squatting on them suddenly came to life. They flapped their wings and welcomed the army of the king of East Lu. There were close to 100 of them. Every one of them was equivalent to a puppet king. As soon as the statues left the city amongst the clouds, a few of them were crushed by the torrent of power. However, they managed to block the majority of the attack. The light barrier stabilized and gradually became thicker. Li Fengyuan commanded the statues and changed the formation. He fought with the army of the king of East Lu. At the same time, he ordered the winged men, "The few of you, don't just stand there. All of you, counterattack." Although the winged men were not willing to listen to his orders, they could only help each other at this time. They were not good at close combat in the first place. Now that they were standing in the city amongst the clouds, they could launch an attack to their heart's content. Light whistled through the air, streaking across the horizon like thunder. They cooperated with the statues in their counterattack against the king of East Lu. Li Fengyuan looked up at the vault of heaven. The dark clouds of tribulation were slowly dispersing. The sun shone down brightly, speeding up the recovery of the light barrier. This was the true source of power for the great formation of the city amongst the clouds. The longer the battle dragged on, the stronger the formation would become. The shadow of a cloud suddenly covered the sky. The shadow cloud crane king looked down and met Li Fengyuan's eyes. Sparks flew. "Give up, Phoenix." City amongst the clouds, rise. Li Fengyuan raised his hand. The city amongst the clouds rose to the horizon and crashed towards the shadow cloud crane king. The shadow cloud crane king stretched out a crane leg and lightly stepped on the city amongst the clouds. It stopped the city amongst the clouds from rising. Its huge crane wings still covered the sky. With a cry of a phoenix, Li Fengyuan shot up into the sky, separated by the light barrier. He slapped the crane leg with his palm. Even if you are the divine bird of Phoenix, you have only just passed the third heavenly tribulation. How can you possibly? The shadow cloud crane king suddenly felt an uncontrollable, enormous power surging up from its leg. It could not suppress it. Glancing sideways at the city, it immediately understood that it had gathered the power of all the feather people. This was something that only the king of feather people could do. Layers of ripples appeared on the barrier. The two powers collided violently. The city amongst the clouds stubbornly rose up straight into the astral wind layer. The higher it rose, the stronger the astral wind became. It whistled and slashed on the light barrier. Immediately, it became dimmer. However, the heavy attacks from the king of East Lu were also baptized by the astral wind. Their power was greatly reduced. Through Bai Chen's memories, Li Fengyuan understood that this was the most normal way of operating the city amongst the clouds. The great formation of the city amongst the clouds had the power to resist the astral wind. If an enemy invaded, it could raise the city amongst the clouds into the astral wind layer, making it difficult for the enemy to launch an attack. Although the great formation's endurance was limited and could not be raised too high, it was enough to ensure that no enemy could be higher than the city amongst the clouds. Otherwise, it would be a joke if the source of its power was easily blocked by others. No wonder the great Xia dynasty can't do anything to the feather people. This city amongst the clouds is simply a divine weapon of war. It is not something that the White Dragon King or the Red Dragon King can compare to. It is a pity that it was greatly weakened by the heavenly tribulation at the beginning. It is difficult to use all kinds of attack methods. Otherwise, it would not be afraid of a mere king of East Lu. A few crane feathers fell. They did not drift for long before they were cut into pieces by the astral wind. Even the 10 demon kings could not stay in the astral wind layer at such a high level for long. The Shadow Cloud Crane King had no choice but to step aside. Before the sunlight could shine down, there was a loud bang. The Cloud State Cauldron heavily pressed down on the city amongst the clouds. Seeing that the cooked duck was about to fly away, the King of East, Lu, could not hold back and drove the Cloud State Cauldron with all his might. The cauldron, which gathered the power of the mountains and rivers of Cloud State, was extremely heavy. The city amongst the clouds began to fall again. The astral wind cut marks on the body of the cauldron, but it was difficult to damage it for a while. At this rate, before the Cloud State Cauldron was damaged, the city amongst the clouds would fall to the ground. Li Fengyuan made up his mind and opened the light barrier. The Cloud State Cauldron fell with the astral wind. Li Fengyuan was the first to bear the brunt. Boom! The palace hall was reduced to ruins. Li Fengyuan's figure also disappeared from it. The feather people were shocked. Unknowingly, he had become the backbone of the feather people. If even he was defeated, the feather people would be in danger of being exterminated. The Cloud State Cauldron continued to fall with the city amongst the clouds. But from the ruins, a loud shout came from under the three-legged cauldron. Close! The light barrier closed again and swallowed the Cloud State Cauldron. Li Fengyuan held the cauldron with both hands. Blood flowed down his face and turned into burning flames. He shouted, "You don't want it anymore? Then give it to me." Chapter 1163. Not good. King Donglu's expression changed. He felt his connection with the Cloud State Cauldron suddenly break. In the end, he had still underestimated the power of the city amongst the clouds. Not long ago, Li Qingshan came knocking, and Bai Chen attempted to lure him into the city. The city amongst the clouds had the ability to suppress everything and isolate the inside from the outside. Once one entered the city amongst the clouds, it would be difficult to escape no matter how powerful one was. Li Fengyuan laughed mischievously and urged the city amongst the clouds to rise continuously until it reached the highest point in the sky. The astral wind stirred up thousands of ripples on the barrier of light, and the sunlight sprinkled down without any obstruction. The barrier of light slowly recovered its light. Although it was extremely slow, it was clearly in an invincible position. Li Fengyuan heaved a deep sigh of relief. All right, he had secured the city amongst the clouds. It was one of the most important spoils of war in this battle. Although they had sacrificed quite a number of human-faced, bird-bodied statues, they weren't their own anyway, so they didn't feel the pinch. "Your Majesty, what do we do now?" A middle-aged man asked. He was also one of the honored guests of the king's manor, but he had only gone through 3 heavenly tribulations not too long ago, so he could not be like the Shadow Cloud Crane King and enter deep into the astral winds. Besides, even if he had the ability, he would not be willing to. The other cultivators also stopped their attacks in unison, clearly harboring the same thoughts. King Donglu and the Shadow Cloud Crane King looked at each other and could only sigh. Even the White Dragon King would quickly disintegrate at such a high altitude, let alone an ordinary cultivator. Coupled with the desperate resistance of the feathered men, it was almost impossible to take down the city amongst the clouds. If they were to disregard everything else, it wasn't like they didn't have a chance at all. However, a Pyrrhic victory was meaningless. Fellow Taoists, it's useless to continue fighting, so why don't we call a truce here? Li Fengyuan said proudly, "Return the Cloud State Cauldron, and we'll mind our own business from now on." King Donglu said, "Hee, you're thinking too much." Li Fengyuan rubbed his head. It was still in great pain. The Cloud Prefecture Cauldron had hit him hard. "I didn't hesitate to go against the winged people to help you, and this is how you repay me." The Shadow Cloud Crane King had never thought that things would develop to this stage. He vaguely guessed that Li Fengyuan would only be able to calmly take control of the city amongst the clouds because Bai Chen had given up on the dispute. if he had the chance to take charge of the city amongst the clouds. He was afraid that he would not be willing to be destroyed by others. Not to mention, he could also use this to suppress the entire winged human race and instantly gain control of a powerful force. As expected of the Feathermen King to be so decisive, fellow Taoist, I will repay your kindness in the future. Please leave today. Li Fengyuan was quite grateful to the Shadow Cloud Crane King. Otherwise, there was an 80% chance that he would die here today. Regardless of what the other party was thinking, a favor was a favor, and he had to repay it. Let's go. The king of East Lu saw that things could not be done. Xiao Chun flicked his sleeves and left, returning to the White Dragon King. The Shadow Cloud Crane King also broke through the air and left. The rest of the lords looked at each other and dispersed. Only then did Li Fengyuan relax completely. He lowered the altitude of the city amongst the clouds a little and sped up the recovery of the Great Formation. The Feathermen in the city were still in a state of shock, but the Feathermen experts quietly gathered over, connecting each other with light rays, forming a three-dimensional diagram, surrounding Li Fengyuan in the center. As expected. Do you want a rebel? Li Fengyuan sat high up on the cloud state cauldron, not surprised at all, as if he had already expected this scene. The city amongst the clouds is the Feathermen's city. What rebellion? Li Fengyuan, on account of your help today, hand over the control of the Great Formation, and the grudge between you and the Feathermen will be written off. You can leave on your own. Li Fengyuan looked up at the sky and asked with narrowed eyes, Just now, you were the one who said that if there were more phoenixes, you would all eat a few, right? So what if I said that? Before he finished speaking, Li Fengyuan appeared in front of that Featherman in a flash, so fast that none of the Feathermen experts could react. Li Fengyuan raised his hand and struck. Scram! That Featherman flew high up, breaking through the air and flying out of the barrier of light. After the battle, his aura was already very weak. Sharp astral winds swept over from all directions, instantly tearing his body apart. Even his divine soul was shattered, and a ring of white light burst out. Good fireworks! Li Fengyuan clapped his hands. With Bai Chen's power and the divine power of the Phoenix bloodline, how many cultivators of the same realm could be his match? Although the Feathermen called themselves gods, in terms of talent, how could they compare to the divine bird that was favored by the world? Kill him! The Feathermen experts flew into a rage. Li Fengyuan pressed down with a flip of his palm. The three-dimensional diagram, formed by the light, collapsed, and all the Feathermen's power was pressed to the ground by a white light. In this city amongst the clouds, who could threaten the Feathermen King? There were still people who wanted to resist, and statues with human faces and bird bodies flew over and clustered around Li Fengyuan, glaring at the Feathermen experts on the ground like tigers watching their prey. Li Fengyuan suddenly sighed, and all of his high-spirited and proud expressions dispersed, revealing a sorrowful expression. I am in a very bad mood now, and there are many things that I don't know what to do. Do you really want me to kill all of you, and then kill all the Feathermen in this city? In that instant, all the Feathermen trembled in fear. Although Li Fengyuan did not reveal any killing intent, no one dared to doubt his determination. He was not only the son of the Phoenix, but also the son of Li Qingshan, and he had never lacked decisiveness in killing. Why did our king hand over the city amongst the clouds to you? A Featherman expert roared, full of resentment, because at that time only I could save all of you. Although at first he wanted to abandon all of you and have fun by himself, and also that woman, Li Fengyuan narrated everything that had happened in the heavenly tribulation, neither lying nor hiding anything. The Feathermen were shocked. Impossible, Don't talk nonsense. How could His Majesty abandon us? It must be you. Shut up, you can believe it or not, but from today onwards, I am the Feathermen King. Those who are not willing to follow my orders, get out of the city amongst the clouds, or I will kill every one of you I see. Li Fengyuan returned to the cloud state cauldron, frowning as he looked toward the west. The sky was getting darker, and the red clouds were burning. The Feathermen experts felt the pressure on their bodies disappear instantly. Even though they were extremely unwilling, they knew that they would be courting death if they attacked now. They communicated telepathically to discuss what to do next, but it gradually turned into a dispute, resulting in a huge disagreement. Today, the Feathermen are unfortunate. The city amongst the clouds has been seized by the foreign race. We should take all the Feathermen and leave this place, building a new city amongst the clouds. You make it sound so simple. The city amongst the clouds is the work of our ancestors for tens of thousands of years. How can it be so easy to rebuild? What do you think we should do? Become the dogs of the foreign race? Who would do that? Who would be the traitor? We must not give up on the city amongst the clouds. Otherwise, we will be letting down our ancestors, and our clansmen will not be able to leave this place. The city amongst the clouds was too important to the Feathermen, not only as a place of emotional sustenance like their homeland, but also as a treasured land that all the Feathermen relied on for survival. Just the speed of cultivation in this city alone was far superior to anywhere else. It was far better than anywhere else. There was also the huge amount of resources sealed in the treasury. It also provided a guarantee for all the Feathermen to cultivate, and it was not something that could be abandoned at will. So the two factions argued for a while. Li Fengyuan did not care about the outcome of their argument. If the Feathermen chose to stay, they would be able to better operate the city amongst the clouds, and they would also have a group of powerful fighters. Even if all the Feathermen left and left him an empty city, it would still be a divine weapon of war, and he would not have to keep any promises to the Feathermen. I must tell the Tree King and her about what happened here. Although Li Fengyuan's strength was not the same as before, he could not help but shiver when he thought of that expressionless face. Thus, he drove the city amongst the clouds away from the layer of astral winds and flew towards Qingzhou. The Feathermen did not question him again, but they knew that if they wanted to make a decision, it was best to make it as soon as possible. When the sky had completely darkened, the Feathermen made a decision. 5 Feathermen powerhouses brought close to 1/3 of the Feathermen and left the city amongst the clouds. The remaining 7 Feathermen powerhouses came to see Li Fengyuan together. We are willing to serve you as our king and listen to your orders, but we have a condition. Speak. When you ascend, you must return the city amongst the clouds to the Feathermen. All right. Perhaps because he had agreed too readily, the Feathermen were a little hesitant. Li Fengyuan sneered and said, "Do you really think that I am worthy of respect in this broken city of yours?" Although the Feathermen were not convinced, they had to admit that the Phoenix had the confidence to say these words. "We believe that you will keep your promise, Your Majesty." At this moment, the city amongst the clouds had already left Yunzhou, and the sky was filled with stars. Li Fengyuan muttered to himself, "Eldest father, where exactly are you now?" The stars flickered, but no one answered. In the deep and dark, starry sky, a feather was drifting, and 2 hands were holding each other's. "Where is this?" Li Qingshan asked. "The void beyond the heavens," Gu Yenying replied. Then she hesitated for a moment before saying, "You why? If I had known that this would be the result, I definitely would not have come. Do you regret it?" "I have never regretted anything in my life." "That's good. Otherwise, there would be more pain. You feel it? Our power is dissipating." "Why is that?" "Forget it. Pretend that I didn't ask." Li Qingshan could not feel any spiritual aura. Instead, his own aura whether it was demonic aura or spiritual aura, was dispersing as if they were being sucked dry by a huge invisible sponge. If this situation continued, they would soon die, and it would be a tragic death of starvation. The stars here are really bright. The stars converge to form a bright sea of stars, like bright pearls embellishing a pitch-black curtain. As they drifted in the void, they were like specks of dust on a pitch-black curtain. At least this is the benefit. This is the scenery that I want you to see. My father once brought me through the astral winds to see it, but it was not as spectacular as it is now. Alas, we are really insignificant. The stars reflected in Gu Yeniying's eyes, and she let out a childlike sigh. All right, have you thought of a way? Li Qingshan could not help but ask. In this short period of time, he had already done all the common sense. However, those powerful magical powers that could allow him to run amok in the 9 prefectures were useless here, and they would only be a waste of power. I'm not thinking, it's precisely because there's no way that I say it's a gamble. You bastard, I don't believe that there's no way. Chapter 1164. If they can enter the Azura field and transfer to the Azura realm, all of their problems will be solved. Although the Azura realm is dangerous, it's better than being trapped to death in the void of space. But the Azura field didn't react at all. It's useless. This place is outside the infinite worlds. The samsara is only connected to the other worlds, Gu Yenying said. In other words, if we die here, we won't even be able to enter the reincarnation? Li Qingshan frowned. Yes, Gu Yenying nodded. With our strength, we don't have the means to cross the void of space. Can you refine that feather? Li Qingshan asked again. I can't, there's too little time. Let me try. But that's mine. Gu Yenying opened her eyes wide. You are already at a time like this. Li Qingshan angrily shouted. Who told you to follow me? Bastard! Li Qingshan pulled her in front of him and raised his hand high into the air, about to slap her. Gu Yenying didn't try to dodge and faced him with her head held high. Under the endless void of space and the endless stars, the two of them stared at each other. Li Qingshan lowered his hand. Fine, I won't lower myself to your level. A person in need really is a man's heart. So do you regret it now? Gu Yenying asked again. I have no regrets in my life. Li Qingshan answered. Thank you for not killing me, but don't be angry. We still have a chance. What chance? This feather, didn't you say you can't refine it? Even if it's you, it's impossible to refine this feather in a short period of time. Instead, it'll consume your own strength faster, and you'll die even faster. But have you ever thought about it? Why did this feather just happen to fall into our world? Gu Yenying's eyes flashed with a bright light. There are so many worlds. It just happened to fall into the 9 continents. That's not right. Although the 3,000 worlds are too many to count compared to the endless void of space. What are they? However, I don't think that this feather was deliberately thrown into our world. The 9 regions world is nothing special among the worlds. That's not necessarily the case. I'm in this world. Perhaps this feather was prepared for me, Li Qingshan retorted, feeling that it made sense. All right, if that's really the case, then I'll give it to you. Then I'll give this feather to you. Gu Yenying said. Just a moment ago, you treated this feather as if it were your own father. Why are you suddenly so generous? This is my Tao. Of course, it's even closer to me than my own father. However, you'd better pray that this feather isn't prepared for you. Otherwise, we'll be doomed this time. So what if I am? So what if I'm not? If it's not, and it just so happens to land in a world, perhaps it's being pulled by the world, or perhaps this feather itself wants to land in a world. Otherwise, what was the point of drifting about in this endless void? But all of this is just my guess. You think this feather contains some kind of will? Yes, if it really is an inheritance, then it must find a successor. At the very least, a world with a successor. So, you won't be at a disadvantage, no matter what. Li Qingshan finally understood. If everything was as she expected, then they could survive. Naturally, this feather wouldn't belong to him. But if she guessed wrong, then everyone would die together. It wouldn't matter who this feather belonged to. Yes, Gu Yenying nodded with certainty. Why didn't you say it clearly just now? Li Qingshan frowned. If she had said it clearly, he wouldn't have gotten angry. Adversity reveals a man's heart. Gu Yenying smiled brightly. It was exactly what Li Qingshan had said just now. You're really getting more and more annoying. Li Qingshan shook his head. The feelings of love at first sight had long been thrown away. Otherwise, should we hug each other for warmth and then confess our feelings when we're about to die? Should we make a solemn vow that we won't be born in the same year, month, and day, but that we will die in the same year and month? It's not like I'm little. And Li Qingshan fell silent. Where was she now? Perhaps she was on the other side of some star. The distance between them had never been so far. They had once agreed to enter the 6 paths of reincarnation together. Only death could separate us. Sorry, Gu Yenying said apologetically. Yes, you're not little, and I'm very regretful now. Li Qingshan waved his hand again. That's very good. The two of you can hold hands and die alone in the endless void. That's fantastic, but I don't care about this broken feather of yours. He already had the best inheritance in the world, the 9 transformations of demons and gods. Although it didn't reject other powers, this green feather wasn't that simple. It definitely came from a powerful life form. Whether it was power or bloodline, it was probably not inferior to any god or demon. If he hastily refined it, it was very likely that the balance of the 9 transformations of demons and gods would be completely broken, and it would be difficult to recover. In fact, this balance had always been very fragile. Even the War Devil catalog would be affected, let alone such an inheritance. So he didn't covet this green feather at all. Thank you, Gu Yenying said. Thank me for not fighting with you. No, thank you for coming to accompany me. If I were alone, I definitely wouldn't be able to smile now. Gu Yenying raised her left hand and clasped her ring finger and little finger with her thumb. Gu Yenying swears to the stars that I will do everything in my power to reunite Li Qingshan and little Anne. What if I break the oath? Li Qingshan glanced at her and said indifferently, Gu Yenying thought about it seriously. If I break the oath, I'll devote myself to you. Li Qingshan originally thought it would be something like, I'll be struck by lightning and die a horrible death. When he heard this, he couldn't help but be stunned. What is this? This is a deadly oath. Gu Yenying said seriously, Deadly oath my ass. Gu Yenying laughed loudly. Her laughter was swallowed up by the silent void, but her expression became more and more carefree and unrestrained. Between life and death, there was great terror, but there was also great joy. Amidst this soundless laughter, the green feather suddenly glowed with a hazy mist of light. It continuously extended and changed until it transformed into a large green bird with a wingspan that spanned tens of thousands of miles. Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying were both dumbfounded. The green feather in their hands was now attached to the ends of the wings like 2 little fleas. They immediately understood who the owner of this green feather was. The back of a pung, who knows how many thousands of miles. Li Qingshan muttered, This was the feather of a rock. Looking at this rock that he couldn't see in its entirety, he suddenly thought of Oxen's back. There seemed to be some similarities between them. However, one was as steady as the earth, while the other was mighty and indistinct. Both of them were releasing an indescribable aura. The rock's sharp eyes gazed at the endless void, penetrated it, and locked on a distant target that Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying couldn't reach. It then raised its wings. Gu Yenying was excited. Sure enough, I was right. "Ha, kid, hurry up. We're about to set off." Instantly, the sea of stars turned upside down. The vast starry sky seemed to become a spinning kaleidoscope. It also seemed like all the stars were falling together, and only they were rising. Like a fly following a horse's tail, it could travel thousands of miles. The endless void was nothing. They could go anywhere they wanted, and they could travel as far as they wanted. Gu Yenying cheered like a child in her heart. Chapter 1165. Qingzhou. A white cloud flew above the great banyan tree at an extraordinary speed, so low that it almost touched the crown of the tree. Li Fengyuan flew out from the cloud, but before he landed on the treetop, a white figure flew over and asked, "Where's your big daddy?" Under the gaze of those ethereal eyes, Li Fengyuan suddenly couldn't say what he had already thought of. Little and pursed her lips, as if she had already expected this. Her fate was linked with Li Qingshan's, and they could faintly sense each other. If she could sense his whereabouts, she would go to the ends of the earth to search for him. Why would she stay under the great banyan tree? That's the winged people's city amongst the clouds. Fengyuan, what happened? The banyan tree king's aged voice came, full of surprise. There was no cultivator in the world who didn't fear the existence of the city amongst the clouds. It's like this. Li Fengyuan took a deep breath and told him everything that had happened. Even the banyan tree king was amazed by the strange twists and turns, and couldn't help but worry for Li Qingshan. If he left this world in this way, it would be equivalent to being banished to the endless void, and that would be terrible. Little En's face was pale, and she subconsciously tightened her grip on the hilt of her sword, trembling slightly. Don't worry. Big Daddy is a good man, and the heavens will help him. He will be fine. Li Fengyuan almost thought that she was going to draw her sword and cut him down. For a moment, he didn't know what to do and could only comfort her with the auspicious words of mortals. Although his power had reached the peak of the 9 provinces through various fated chances, he was still too young. Little and closed her eyes and slowly let go of the hilt of her sword. She calmly said, "I'm going to find him. He is no longer in this world." "How are you going to find him?" the banyan tree king asked. "Then I'll go to another world to find him." "It's not that easy to go to another world. Do you know how many worlds there are?" The banyan tree king sighed. "Then I'll go find them one by one." Little Anne opened her eyes and gazed at the distant stars. Although her words were filled with determination, even someone who didn't know how to read people's expressions could clearly feel that her heart was in chaos. Rather than searching for him, why don't you wait for him to come back and find you? Otherwise, if both of you get lost in the vast Milky Way, it will be even more difficult for us to meet again. The banyan tree king advised in a gentle voice. In a short period of time, he had already used all his branches and carefully deduced all kinds of information to the extreme. He got a result similar to that of Gu Yenying. If that feather really was the legacy of some powerful god fiend, he shouldn't end up with the worst possible outcome of drifting in the void forever. Hearing this analysis, Li Fengyuan's eyes immediately lit up. That must be the case. Although that feather isn't a phoenix feather, it's definitely not inferior to the bloodline of the phoenix, not to mention its power. How could it wither away in the 9 prefectures for no reason? It's not like it's an ordinary bird, so it must have some sort of inheritance. Big Dad must have gone to another world. Yes. Little Anne nodded slightly. Although they were isolated from the endless void, she had a faint feeling that he was definitely still alive, but she didn't know if it was just her wishful thinking. At this moment, hearing the Banyan Tree King's words, she was even more certain that as long as he was still alive somewhere, there would be a time when they would meet again. Since that Commander Gu obtained that feather, she only needs to inherit the legacy within and cultivate a bit more. Then, she will be able to return here. After all, she came from this world. It's much easier for someone who left their hometown to return to their hometown than to leave their hometown and search for them in the vast world. Thank you for your guidance, Senior Tree King. I will wait here for him to come back. However, the Banyan Tree King had a hidden worry that he didn't mention. If Li Qingshan landed in the same world as the 9 prefectures, it would be fine. However, if he landed in a small world, he would probably immediately be strongly rejected by that world, and that would be a fatal disaster. For example, if a demon emperor forcefully entered the 9 prefectures, he would definitely be killed by the wind and thunder of the world without anyone needing to do anything. This was the basic law of the world. Furthermore, the possibility of this happening was very high. After all, among the 3,000 worlds, there were many more small worlds. I hope that he will be safe and sound. In a nameless world, the sky was filled with stars at this moment. The mountains rose and fell, and the rivers flowed endlessly. There didn't seem to be anything special about it. However, compared to the 9 prefectures, everything seemed small. However, although a sparrow was small, it had all the essentials. Other than the scenery of the mountains and rivers, there were also human cities. Even the starry palace lanterns couldn't completely illuminate the palace. All kinds of magnificence were drowned in the darkness. A dignified middle-aged man walked through the palace with his hands behind his back. Along the way, the guards and palace maids all knelt on the ground and shouted, "Long live the Alliance Master!" The man ignored them and hurried to the front of a 100-feet-tall building. With a leap, a whirlwind rose under his feet, and he arrived at the top of the building. There was a small mountain 5 kilometers outside the city, and there was a Taoist temple on top of it. 2 elders happened to see this scene from afar. One of them was dressed like a monk, and the other was dressed like a Taoist priest. The monk's head was bright and shiny, not to mention hair or beard. He didn't even have eyebrows. He looked like a big meatball. The Taoist priest's hair was messy, and his face was full of beard. He drank wine in big mouthfuls. The Alliance Master's Imperial Wind technique is getting more and more amazing. I think it won't be long before he can break through the void and ascend. The monk said, "It's not that easy to ascend. How many Alliance Masters have appeared since ancient times? Not even 1/10 of them managed to ascend. I think this Alliance Master Zhang doesn't have the fortune to do so. Don't be jealous. In the last martial arts circle convention, you lost by 1 move. You can only live on this barren mountain and can't have fun in the city." The monk laughed. "I'm not like you, who admitted defeat without a fight. I'm just an outsider, and I'm not too interested in the position of Alliance Master. I think you know you're no match for me, and you're afraid of embarrassing yourself. You really don't know what's good for you. I came to see you with good intentions, and now you're talking about me. Do you want to have a taste of my tiger-taming fist?" The monk raised the corner of his eye, and suddenly there was a hint of killing intent. "All right, bald donkey, my purple cloud incantation has improved a lot recently. I was just worried that I didn't have an opponent to test it on." In an instant, one of them was covered in golden light, and the other had purple clouds above his head. They were ready to fight. At this time, on the tall building in the palace, the Alliance Master Zhang cupped his hands at the small mountain. The 2 of them had no choice but to retract their genuine qi and return the gesture. Zhang Yuntian put down his hands, and there was no expression on his face. Anyway, they were separated by such a long distance, and they couldn't see each other's expressions clearly. So, he didn't bother to put on an act. He cursed these two old farts and continued to focus on absorbing the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Suddenly, a green light cut through the sky and landed in the extreme north. Chapter 1166. The Milky Way flowed in reverse, and the concept of time was lost. Li Qingshan couldn't even tell whether it was a second or a day. However, the joy that came from Gu Yeniying's heart never changed, making him admire her. Craziness! This woman is just pretending to be a normal person. I've lived 2 lives, and I was almost fooled by her. His spiritual power continued to dissipate, first weakening, then weakening, and finally almost exhausted. Death approached step by step. However, in this endless galaxy, it seemed to have become some kind of empty concept, causing one to be unable to feel actual fear. Instead, there was an even deeper emptiness that filled one's heart bit by bit. Perhaps Gu Yeniying's guess was right, but when the rock feather searched for the next place of inheritance, it probably wouldn't consider the life and death of the 2 little insects attached to the feather. To be able to die in such a magnificent scenery, my life won't be in vain, but I still can't accept it. Qingshan, don't worry, this is a test. Gu Yeniying transmitted her thoughts, and the joy contained in her thoughts increased. Is that so? Li Qingshan noticed that although she had also become very weak, her condition was a little better than his. The difference in strength between them wasn't particularly big, but it wasn't small either. She should have been even weaker, unless there was some other opportunity. And this opportunity was probably the rock feather. I can feel it. It likes me. Gu Yeniying didn't hide the pride in her heart, as if there was some kind of compatibility between their temperaments. She felt that the rock feather approved of her, and a trace of connection was established between them. Although she hadn't yet obtained the inheritance, she believed that as long as she had enough time, she would definitely be able to go further. I hope it's not I like you to death. Li Qingshan made a cold joke. Gu Yeniying, have a heart in the 9 heavens, and I will definitely soar. How can I die in this place? Gu Yeniying was in high spirits, full of incomparable confidence. Li Qingshan rolled his eyes, but felt a sense of deja vu bang. The starry river that filled the sky scattered, as if it had collided with something extremely hard. Then it was instantly pierced through. The Kuan Peng transformed from the feather disappeared. A whole world came crashing down on him. Li Qingshan was overjoyed. Just as he was about to absorb the spiritual chi of heaven and earth and activate his innate ability, he suddenly felt the whole world closing in on him. Invisible shackles extended into his divine soul. He was firmly imprisoned. Suddenly, he remembered the laws of the worlds. Not good. Boom. With an earth-shattering noise, everything fell into complete darkness. After an unknown period of time, Li Qingshan slowly woke up. Between the towering cliffs, the stars were shining brightly. He finally calmed down. He wanted to stand up, but he felt intense pain all over his body, and he couldn't move. He didn't know how many bones were broken, and even his meridians and body were severely damaged. In his arms was a warm body. Gu Yeniying laid motionlessly on his chest. However, compared to his sorry state, she seemed to be in a much better state. Other than her slightly messy hair, her body was almost spotless. She was so quiet as if she had fallen into a deep sleep. What was even more infuriating was that there was a hint of a smile on her lips. It was obvious that the Kuan Peng feather had protected her. Li Qingshan heaved a sigh of relief. Even such a slight movement caused his internal organs to tremble. He simply laid there, quietly waiting for his injuries to recover. However, he immediately realized that his injuries weren't healing very quickly. He couldn't use any of his innate abilities, let alone other methods. Even the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was rejecting him. There was clearly nothing around him, but he could clearly feel a deep and enormous hostility. That was the hostility of the entire world. Just as he was about to focus his thoughts and understand his current situation, a pain that was thousands of times more intense than the pain on his body came from Gu Yenying. He wasn't unfamiliar with this kind of pain. It was the hot wind hell. As expected, the pain of hell followed him like a shadow. Once he left the void, the hot wind began to surge again. Gu Yenying frowned. Her eyelashes trembled slightly. She opened her bright eyes and smiled. "Morning. Can I trouble you to get up from my body?" Li Qingshan asked. "What, are you hurt?" Gu Yenying didn't have any intention of obeying. "Obviously." "Very good." Gu Yenying smiled brightly. "I will take care of you, because I am unharmed." He jumped up, but the soil under his feet suddenly collapsed. He missed a step and fell to the ground again. His head happened to hit a rock with a bang. "Ha ha ha!" Li Qingshan didn't care about the pain on his body and laughed loudly. He had never seen her in such a sorry state before. "I understand now." Gu Yenying sat up. Her previously spotless face was now covered in dirt. "Understand what?" "This is a small world." "TSK, I already knew that." "Then do you know why I fell?" Gu Yenying said as blood trickled down from her head. Huffed. "It's because our power is suppressed by this world. However, our luck isn't bad. This world is small enough. Not only is our power insufficient, our willpower is also very weak. Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that we used up all of our power in the void. Otherwise, we would be struck by lightning and die. You better bandage your head. Dying from excessive blood loss is too laughable. You're right, but it's not luck. From now on, we don't have any more luck to talk about." Gu Yenying tried to tear off a piece of her sleeve. However, this transcendent magical robe of hers was too tough. Even if the power of all her magic was suppressed, the material of the robe wasn't something she could move at her current level. She thought of something and pinched the rock feather. She cut a long white cloth on her sleeve and wiped the blood off her face. Then she wrapped it around her head. "You look like your father died," Li Qingshan commented. "If my father was in this world, I'm afraid he would have been killed by me. If he was a mortal, I would have killed him. If he was a mortal, I know my power has been sealed. Just now, although I'm a little carried away, I'm still looking at where I'm standing. However, the place I stepped on just had to be an empty hole. When I tried to adjust my body, there was a rock buried under the soil. Don't you think it's too much of a coincidence? It's practically a flawless trap. In other words, although this world doesn't have the ability to directly kill us, it wants to do so very much, so we'll be very unlucky." Li Qingshan seemed to understand something. He roused. "Now, I have a title for you, the Unlucky Ghost of Hell." Gu Yenying fell silent. "I'm a little cold." "Look, your scorching wind hell is still working, but at the same time, you're so unlucky. Please don't say any more. I'll catch a cold." Gu Yenying covered his mouth with her hand. "You don't seem too happy. Do you think I should be happy? You've won the bet, and it's a very big one at that. However, I feel more and more like I shouldn't have come." Li Qingshan gazed at the stars with his pitch-black eyes. He actually seemed rather melancholic. "You should be happy, but because you already have something to worry about, you're unhappy." Gu Yenying touched his forehead. Her face blocked his line of sight. Li Qingshan was in thought. He had once abandoned Crouching Ox Village without the slightest hesitation, swearing that he would never return. To the current him, Was the 9 provinces more worthy of nostalgia than Crouching Ox Village? He had once made up his mind to go to places he had never been to see sights he had never seen before, and to conquer the most powerful enemies. This place was not as lofty as the 9 heavens, but was it not a brand new world? The enemies he faced were even the heavens. Even though he was heavily injured, his fighting spirit should have been high, and he should have embarked on new adventures in high spirits, not reminisce about the 9 provinces. I know I can't replace Little N's position in your heart, nor do I plan on replacing him. However, I will do everything I can to help you, all the way until the day you reunite. I've sworn an oath. You sly woman. Do you think I can't tell? There seemed to be nothing wrong with this oath. As a matter of fact, it really was poison to her. This was not as simple as rolling around in bed. It was a change of path, an agreement of alliance, and a path of cultivation. However, to him, this was equivalent to giving up on searching for Little Anne. How was it possible for her to replace Little Anne's position? So you found out. However, you should be able to understand me. If there are too many worries, I won't be able to advance bravely. Gu Yenying pulled Li Qingshan's arms and carried him on her back. She carefully and strenuously crawled out of the pit. Li Qingshan was momentarily speechless. Although he really wanted to say something hot-blooded, like, "It's precisely because I have worries that I can advance bravely," he knew very well that his perseverance was not because of a certain person. Brother Ox naturally understood this, and so did Little, and that was why in the Clam King of Mirage Sea's dream, even if he had forgotten everything, he still continued to walk. Otherwise, wouldn't his relationship with Han Qiongji, his friendship with the Banyan Tree King, and his father-son relationship with Li Fengyuan also be a kind of worry? She sighed. A heartless person like you is truly detestable. The same goes for you. Sigh, it's really too heavy. Carrying a person is like carrying a mountain. Gu Yenying's forehead was covered in sweat, and she panted heavily. She glanced back meaningfully. Even scorching wind, hell can't be used? Li Qingshan asked. Yes, only the punishment has been retained. Gu Yenying climbed out of the pit with great difficulty and gently placed him on the ground. Her hands were covered in blood as she frowned and said, "We must think of a way to heal your wounds, or it'll probably continue to worsen. We're too unpopular in this world." Before she had even finished speaking, a dull rumble echoed through the valley. Cracks rapidly spread across the cliffs on both sides. This could be said to be the effect of the collision just now had caused, but they could clearly sense the existence of Heaven's will and deep malice. Boom! The entire cliff collapsed, turning into a torrent of rock and earth that surged into the valley. It looks like I've still lost the gamble. Gu Yenying smiled bitterly. In their current state, being buried by 1,000,000 tons of rock and earth would only lead to death. Aren't we going to run? Li Qingshan looked at a nearby colonel. Forget it. I didn't ask to be born in the same year and month, but I asked to die in the same year and month. Gu Yenying shook her head helplessly and sat down next to him. She looked at the incoming dust, but she showed no regret. Chapter 1167. Bang! A large hand covered in scars pressed against the ground, stirring up fine dust and smoke. However, the determination it contained seemed to surpass the surging torrent of mud. Li Qingshan, who was so heavily injured that he couldn't move, actually sat up. His body was covered in scars, but he was flowing with 7-colored splendor. Gu Yenying was slightly taken aback. She felt her waist tighten. The moment before they were engulfed by the landslide, a tornado roared and swept them up into the night sky. Li Qingshan stood on the tornado with his legs between his legs. His long hair danced like ink as he gazed into the distance. He could see mountains and rivers spanning thousands of kilometers. The valley below had already been completely filled with rock, almost becoming their burial ground. The starry sky was vast, possessing a splendor that rivaled the 9 provinces. Is the enemy this time the heaven? The sorrow of parting turned into fighting spirit. How could I be the type to moan and lament? Gu Yenying looked up, and her heart trembled slightly. He was still the same person. The rolling smoke and dust dispersed, and Li Qingshan slowly descended. His legs gave way, and he half knelt on the ground. His injuries were far from fully recovered. Gu Yenying hurriedly helped him up and asked curiously, "What kind of power is this? It can actually surpass the laws of the world." Divine talisman of great creation. Li Qingshan opened his palm, and a colorful and magnificent talisman with flowing splendor floated above it. It was the core of the School of Novel's power, divine talisman of great creation. In the crater, he tried all the powers in his body one by one, and finally found that this almost forgotten divine talisman of great creation was still flowing with splendor, although it was also suppressed by the laws of the world and could only manifest the methods of Qi practitioners. It could not break through the invisible boundary of this world. But it was enough. "I almost forgot that you're from the School of Novels. I understand now. So it's the power of faith." Gu Yenying understood a little. The power of faith was an extremely special power, and the most common was that of Buddhist believers. No matter what world they were in, as long as they prayed sincerely, they could communicate with the gods and Buddhas. However, if it was used as a cultivation method, it would be too troublesome to gather, and it was not very useful in battle. Moreover, it was a consumable item. Therefore, very few people would take this path. At most, they would use it as a form of support to refine 1 or 2 treasures, such as the golden seal in the hands of the various prefecture overseers. If they were to fall into such a small world, it was also impossible for him to activate it. In this respect, the School of Novels was indeed a weirdo. Consider yourself lucky to have met me. Just now that mountain-shattering scene. Being treated as an enemy by the world was definitely not just bad luck. But wherever there is a possibility of danger, there will definitely be danger. When encountering a mountain, it would collapse. If one went out during a thunderstorm, one would definitely be struck by lightning. If one did not have enough strength, one would not even be able to survive for a day. If Gu Yenying was alone, she would have lost her life here. As long as there's life, there's hope. Gu Yenying patted Li Qingshan's shoulder with a serious expression. "It's too cold. I have no interest in dying in the same year, month, and day as a humorless woman like you. Of course it's best if you don't die. How are your injuries?" Gu Yenying raised her eyebrows and smiled. "At least I won't die." Li Qingshan moved his limbs and activated the divine talisman of great creation to continue healing his injuries. He reached out and touched Gu Yenying's head. Light flowed between his fingers. "What a useful ability, but you better use it sparingly. I'm afraid we'll be trapped for a long time." Gu Yenying took off the bandage. Her injuries had healed, and her mind was much clearer. Although it was not a serious injury, she had no doubt that if it was not treated in time, it would still cost her life. "You're right. I still have ties. It's not just little, and there are still all sorts of grievances that have yet to be settled. I have to return to the 9 states. How long will it take for you to completely refine this Kuan Peng feather, accept its inheritance, and bring us back to the 9 states? It's hard to say. This world is really too small. It has restricted all of my power. I'm afraid I was stronger than I am now when I was born. Even if you gave me an artifact now, It would be difficult for me to refine it, let alone this Kuan Peng feather. Gu Yenying also frowned. Her current situation was really not much better than an ordinary person's. It was difficult for an individual to fight against the world, even if it was a small world. As expected of the unlucky ones in hell, things never go well. I think this is the luckiest place. Think about it. If we were in a bigger world, what would happen? If we were in a world bigger than the 9 states, what would happen? That's true. If the world was a little bigger, it would not be as simple as just restricting power. Instead, it would be directly bombarded by heavenly thunder and earthly fire. If they were in a world as big as the 9 states, or even bigger, they would have attracted countless experts when they descended from the sky. Not only would they not be able to keep the Kuan Peng feather, their lives would also be in danger. It was because this world was sufficiently weak that no one could react even after they descended for so long. It's really too weak. Could it be that they came on horses? Li Qingshan did not think that he had guessed correctly. There was a large group of people coming here. Actually, I have a feeling that it brought us to this small world because I thought about this when I crossed the void. I told you before, it likes me. As long as we can escape from here, I will definitely be able to refine it. Without the Kuan Peng feather, how can we escape from here? If you can really control it with your will, why don't you want to return to the 9 states? Li Qingshan questioned. Of course, all of this is just my guess. It might not be accurate, Gu Yenying said seriously. In fact, if they wanted to keep this Kuan Peng feather, returning to the 9 states would not be as safe as staying here. The fall of the meteor was too eye-catching. I can trust you. Give it to me. Li Qingshan extended his hand to grab the Kuan Peng feather. Hey, what are you doing? That's mine. Gu Yenying struggled as hard as she could, but how could she resist Li Qingshan's brute strength? He forcefully pried her hand away and took the Kuan Peng feather away. She could not help but widen her eyes and call out, Li Qingshan! How is it? Li Qingshan fiddled around with the Kuan Peng feather and tried to power the divine talisman of great creation to analyze it. Sure enough, although it resonated with the phoenix slightly, it was greatly rejected by the spirit turtle, ox demon, and tiger demon. This made sense. The most powerful bloodlines had always been difficult to fuse with one another. The images of the remaining 4 transformations of the demonic and divine did not contain the Kuan Peng. If you're done looking at it, give it back to me. Gu Yenying made her way over. She was rather nervous. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. No matter how graceful and composed he was, it was just because he had not encountered anything important. He called out, You short-sighted woman. The Kuan Peng feather is so extraordinary, yet you actually treat it as a regular arcane artifact or arcane treasure. If it possessed intelligence, it would definitely fly into a rage. Your strength might have been restricted, making you feel like you're extremely weak, but in the eyes of the owner of the feather, is there really such a great difference between your strength and weakness? Gu Yenying shuddered. Suddenly losing all of her strength made her feel unprecedentedly weak. Now that she heard what Li Qingshan said, she suddenly felt like she had seen a ray of light. In the past, you were a frog in a well. Now, you've just become a worm at the bottom of a well. And when an eagle soars through the sky, probably even the well won't notice it. Li Qingshan fiddled with the Kuan Peng feather in his hand with certainty. If there really is a legacy in there, then the standard it uses to evaluate the successor definitely won't be strength, but something else. This was something he had personally experienced. An oxen had accompanied a mountain boy for his entire childhood, and it wasn't because he was very strong. You're right. Gu Yenying's eyes sparkled, filled with undisguised admiration. Even when he saved her life just now, she wasn't this excited. She cupped her hands and said, "Thank you. In the end, my vision is still too narrow, and I take my own strength too seriously. Deal with it as soon as possible." "Of course." Gu Yenning couldn't wait to take the feather from Li Qingshan's hand. Back to the original question. "I hope to return to the 9 prefectures as soon as possible," Li Qingshan said. "Now, I have good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first?" "I'll tell you the bad news first. It took us across the void, and it consumed its own strength. Although it's slowly recovering in a way that I can't understand, it's really very slow. I'm afraid it'll take 100 years. 100 years? Li Qingshan frowned. Or 200 years. We have to accumulate enough strength for the next time we cross the void. Then what's the good news?" "Wait, I got it." Li Qingshan suddenly understood. The flow of time between a big world and a small world was different, and the difference could even be very big. A day in the heavens is a year on the earth was also very normal. According to the clues left by Brother Ox, the time ratio between the 9 heavens and the 9 prefectures was very likely to be 10 years for one day. The time ratio between this small world and the 9 prefectures might not be that big, but it was definitely not small either. 100 years was not a long time. In fact, it was only equivalent to a closed-door training in the 9 prefectures. Although this world imprisons us and wants to destroy us, it has given us the most precious time. I need time to obtain the inheritance of the great rock, and you also need time to sharpen your mind. After all, your cultivation speed is too fast. Those so-called geniuses spend 1,000 years to achieve it, but you only used 1/10 of it. However, some things can't be made up with talent. That is indeed good news. Li Qingshan nodded. Gu Yenning's words were very reasonable. Many times, an advantage was also a disadvantage. Mind comprehension and experience might sound illusory, but they had a great impact on a cultivator. The so-called bottlenecks basically all stemmed from these internal reasons. Back then, the Clam King of Mirage Sea's great dream had benefited him greatly. Speaking of which, it was actually quite similar to his current situation. He had also lost all his strength and experienced all kinds of pain and setbacks. That was still a dream, but he was now facing a real world, so the comprehension he gained would definitely be deeper. Chapter 1168. As the saying goes, heaven and earth are the furnace, and nature is the work. Since we are trapped in this world, let's temper ourselves well. Li Qingshan let out a great roar, which echoed through the dark mountains and forests. Although he had basically lost all of his power, the spirit he had forged through hardship and danger did not weaken at all. Instead, the more setbacks and difficulties he faced, the more tenacious he became. Chapter Gu, Yenning looked at him with a smile. No one knew what she was thinking. She raised her hand to the sky and said, "As you wish, it's coming again." Dark clouds suddenly rose in the sky, covering the starry sky like a big curtain. The wind gradually sounded, with bone-chilling coldness. "The snowstorm is coming." Gu Yenning took a deep breath of the cold air, and her mind became clearer. It was late autumn, and this place was a cold place. It was not strange for the snow to come. It could only be said that it came a little earlier and a little more violently. Just like what they had experienced just now, all the bad things that could happen would definitely happen. "Everything is good here, but it's too boring," Li Qingshan said with a smile. "If there were only bad things and no good things, life would be short of an unexpected joy. Yes, I'm a little cold. Let's go to a warm place." Gu Yenning hugged her arms and shivered. The restriction formation of this world was really powerful. Not only did it seal all their strength, but it also weakened their physiques. Without Li Qingshan's divine talisman of great creation, they would probably freeze to death in this world of ice and snow. And in a warm place, there would definitely be human beings who could find ways to accumulate power for the divine talisman of great creation to fight against the endless disasters. Let's go. Li Qingshan felt that it was a little strange in his heart. Once they put aside their disputes, they could understand each other's thoughts with just a few words. This kind of tacit understanding only existed when he was with Little, but it was also a little different. Before he could carefully distinguish, howls sounded in the forest, as if they were crying, complaining, sad, and angry. Wrapped in the cold wind, there was endless mournfulness. "It's really endless," Li Qingshan said. "Who said that I would only be unlucky? My luck is here." Gu Yenying smiled. "That's true. I take back what I said just now." Li Qingshan nodded. He was thinking about how to go. The power of a world was so strong that it was hard to resist. It was almost boundless, but because its will was too profound and indistinct, it couldn't think and judge like a real living being. The whistling sound quickly approached, and pairs of green eyes lit up in the darkness. One by one, vigorous figures leaped about in the darkness. His weapon flashed with a cold light. "I think it's a monkey." Gu Yenying listened carefully. Due to the confinement of this world, her pair of eagle eyes were no longer as sharp as usual. She could only vaguely see a few black shadows leaping about. It didn't look like a human. "It's an ape," Li Qingshan corrected. The world in his eyes was still clear and colorful. Seeing Gu Yenying's appearance, he suddenly remembered that when he was still a teenager, he had once shed an ox's tear. But other than using it to find Little, and it didn't have much use later on. Even ordinary Qi practitioners could see things at will, but he didn't expect that he was still not affected by the law of the world. Gu Yenying vaguely saw that they were surrounded by a group of apes, wearing armor and holding various kinds of weapons in their hands. Although they were constantly leaping irascibly, it seemed that they had been trained. They were in a joint attack formation, emitting a demonic aura that stirred up the flying snow. "Can anyone here understand what I'm saying?" Li Qingshan asked. The only response he received was still the howls of apes filled with hostility. He could not help but shake his head. After all, they were just demons. No, there were only 2 or 3 demons. The rest were all demonic beasts. Even if they could understand them, they would not be able to respond. "Who are you?" A strange and hoarse voice suddenly sounded, vaguely resembling the ape's howl. The apes all quieted down. They even bowed their bodies and lowered their weapons, like courtiers welcoming the arrival of their king. Li Qingshan looked in the direction of the voice. A bright sword light broke through the air. This time, Gu Yenying also saw it clearly. She couldn't help but let out a sigh. "Oh, it's sword riding." "Alas, yes," Li Qingshan said. In this remote, small world, it was really too familiar to see someone riding a sword. The sword light whistled down and spun back into the scabbard. A white ape carrying a long sword stood 10 feet away. It was cold and arrogant. It was also wearing a robe. If it weren't for its monkey face, it would look more like a human swordsman. TSK, it can actually speak human language. Li Qingshan sighed in admiration inside. This white ape had clearly not undergone the heavenly tribulation yet. In the past, when he was a demon general underground, none of the commanders of the demon soldiers under his command possessed such an ability. However, perhaps there was no need for him to communicate with humans. "Who are you?" the white ape said coldly. "My name is Li Qingshan. She is Gu Yenying. May I know your name?" Li Qingshan had originally planned to capture the 2 apes as mounts and send them out of the mountain. But seeing that they were also people he could communicate with and wouldn't be driven by this side of the world, he decided to communicate and have a third contact to save the power of the divine talisman of great creation. Do you think the name of the White Ape King is something you deserve to know? The White Ape King tilted its head slightly and frowned at the rather disheveled man and woman. It had been many years since humans had dared to intrude into its territory. Moreover, they were two ordinary people who hadn't even entered the innate stage. The man had a strong physique, as if he had practiced some hard body skills, but he hadn't practiced both internal and external cultivation. At his age, he was basically useless and wouldn't live more than 100 years. The woman was even weaker, but she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen in his life. Her grace, in particular, was so indescribable that even his mind was shaken. Li Qingshan was stunned for a moment. It had been many years since anyone had spoken to him like this. If there had been some demon king in the 9 states who had shown off to him like this, he would have immediately greeted them with iron fists. But now it was an ape demon who hadn't even passed the heavenly tribulation. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had seen his fair share of kings, but he had never seen one this weak. So it's Lord White Ape King. It's an honor to meet you. May I know why you're here? Gu Yenying asked with cupped hands. Li Qingshan understood what she meant. She wanted to get some information out of him. Anyway, he wasn't really angered by the White Ape King, so he let her be. Did you see the demon star fall here? The White Ape King's expression softened. He had questions to ask as well. The descent of the demon star was a rare event that only happened once in 1,000 years. He had been cultivating at the time and hadn't seen it with his own eyes. He had only heard reports from his subordinates, but he had been unable to determine the precise location of the demon star's fall. It was only when he heard the sound of a landslide that he rushed over. However, he didn't see the demon star he had imagined, only this strange man and woman. He had seen the demon star that had fallen last time, but he had never imagined that the demon star would be a living person and standing right in front of him. The demon star. Li Qingshan suddenly understood. The situation in which he and Gu Yenying had fallen was probably similar to that of a meteor. Chapter 11:69. I don't care if you asked or not. Li Qingshan said. The White Ape King grinned. Interesting. It's been many years since anyone has dared to speak to me like that. Ever since it saw the two of them, it had felt an indescribable sense of disgust, especially towards Li Qingshan. It wanted nothing more than to get rid of him, and it had never intended to spare his life. Now, its murderous intent was aroused. The apes bared their teeth and revealed their viciousness. They brandished the weapons in their hands and approached him step by step, wanting to rip Li Qingshan to pieces. Communication is impossible. Li Qingshan shrugged at Gu Yenying. The White Ape King's hostility towards him was inexplicable. Could it be that it was also influenced by the will of the world? There was no lack of such a possibility. It was said that many people on the brink of death would lose their minds and try to seek death. The mysteries of fate were truly terrifying. Li Qingshan, if you don't want to live, don't drag me down with you. Sir, I am willing to surrender. Gu Yenying raised her hands and walked towards the White Ape King, facing the blades of the apes. You. Li Qingshan was surprised. She was not much stronger than a mortal right now, but he understood what she was planning with a single thought. Although it was a risky move, it was still a good move. If it succeeded, it would save him a lot of trouble. The ordinary apes had not yet shed their bestial nature. They did not care whether she was a beauty or not, and the weapons in their hands were ready to strike at Gu Yenying. Let her come, the White Ape King said. This Gu Yenying was a rare beauty, and he could take her back to the cave and slowly enjoy her. Gu Yenying crossed the swords and walked through the ruins left by the landslide with great difficulty. She carefully tested the terrain, with every step to avoid falling into another unlucky trap. The White Ape King saw it all. He dispelled the last of his doubts. Her martial arts were weaker than he had thought, and she was so cautious that she was almost timid. Her eyes stared blankly ahead, and it was obvious that she could not see clearly. But even so, there was still a strange charm to her that attracted his attention. Gu Yenying finally made it to the front of the White Ape King and heaved a sigh of relief. But he stepped on empty air. He fell forward. The White Ape King stretched out its arm, and Gu Yenying seized the opportunity to grab onto its furry ape paw. From start to finish, she had not shown the slightest hint of hostility, even at this moment. The White Ape King felt as if it had been struck by lightning, an indescribable and unimaginable pain. It had seized his soul. He felt like he was in hell. Gu Yenying's smiling face blurred into darkness. Only the sound of the wind could be heard. However, it became incomparably hot, and it curled up and fell to the ground. The 6 paths of reincarnation were omnipresent, and the pain of hell followed them like a shadow. This was Gu Yenying's only remaining ability. The ape demons were shocked and angry. They howled and charged at Gu Yenying. An energy saber swept out for 100 feet, stirring up snow in the air. Blood splattered, and broken limbs flew everywhere, dirtying the snow-white ground. The howling quietened down. Li Qingshan held a long golden saber in his hand. It was not the Dying Blossoms, but the Dragon Slayer saber. The long saber only lasted for a moment before disappearing without a trace. Strange. Just now, although I spared no effort and condensed the energy of the saber to the extreme, its power is much greater than I imagined. Li Qingshan muttered to himself. It seemed that the various mysteries of the big and small worlds were not just the difference in the flow of time. The difference in the thinness of spiritual qi needed to be studied slowly. He moved like the wind under his feet, passing through the ruins and arriving beside Gu Yenying. He pulled out the huge sword on the White Ape King's back. A cold air rushed toward him, but upon closer inspection, it was nothing more than an ordinary spiritual weapon. It might not even be considered a high-grade weapon, and it did not have any spirituality to speak of. It was made of good materials, and the words "true steel" were carved on the hilt. He gripped the hilt with both hands and raised the true steel sword with great difficulty, slashing it hard at the White Ape King's neck. With a clang like the sound of metal clashing, the huge sword was bounced off, but only a white mark was left on the White Ape King's neck. As expected of the White Ape King, Li Qingshan smiled. Although the White Ape King was known as the Monkey King when the tiger was absent, he was still a peak expert in this world. If it were not for Gu Yenying restraining him, he probably would have to expend a lot more effort. The White Ape King suddenly raised its head. At this critical moment, it had finally recovered a trace of consciousness from the pain, but it saw that its subordinates had all been wiped out, broken limbs and blood splattered all over the ground, and even it had fallen into the enemy's hands. Its expression was full of hatred. Such an expression was enough to make anyone in this world tremble in fear. But unfortunately, the person in front of it was not from this world. His willpower is not bad. Gu Yenying nodded. The spiritual qi in this small world was so thin, and to be able to cultivate to such a level was not an easy task. Perhaps it was limited by its vision, but its temperament was not bad. However, she was not too worried. This was the first time she had experienced such hellish torture, and it was not something that could be adapted to in a short period of time. "Oh," Li Qingshan responded, and swung the true steel sword again. He lamented that his ox demon's strength had declined to such an extent that he could not even wield a huge sword freely. "Hey, Don't really cut him down. Why don't you try to get him to surrender? If we can get the help of this white ape, we'll have a much easier time. Gu Yenying said, don't waste your time. He's not some little demon, but a king of demons. Just his attitude alone will not allow him to surrender. Even if he does surrender, he'll be ready to retaliate at any time. It's too troublesome. Let me cut him down. Wait, don't damage its fur. Let me do it. Gu Yenying pinched the Kuanping feather between her fingers. The white ape king was enraged. He had actually been treated as an ordinary beast. In this desperate situation, the surrounding spiritual chi surged in, and his demonic aura suddenly surged. A gurgling sound came from his throat, as if he was about to break through. Suddenly, he felt a cold sensation in his throat, and blood gushed out. No, I should have seen through their abnormalities. How could two ordinary people enter so deep into the north? How could they have such grace? That man is 100 times more dangerous than any opponent I've met in my life, but he doesn't have much hostility. Why didn't I act carefully and instead wanted to kill him? Could it be? The final radiance of the setting sun before death cleared his mind and allowed him to understand many things, but it also gave birth to even more doubts. The coldness flowed into his wounds through his blood, filling his entire body. At the end of the day, he was just an ape demon who had not gone through heavenly tribulations. It was impossible for him to have the powerful vitality of a demon general or demon commander. After a short while, he collapsed in the pool of blood with his eyes wide open, and a layer of snow covered him in the blink of an eye. Li Qingshan felt a tinge of sorrow. What he was sorrowful about was not death. No matter when or where, dying in battle was not considered sorrowful. What was truly sorrowful was dying without knowing why. He was clearly so weak, but he thought he was strong and bullied others as he pleased. Such a way of dying was not just sorrowful, it was simply shameful. He reminded himself again, Li Qingshan, you're still nothing right now. The demon king of the North Moon may not be much stronger than this white ape king. It's better for you to step forward obediently. Chapter 1170. You've taken a lot of risks in this battle. Besides, you can't even survive now. Let's split it in half. Li Qingshan weighed the Yao core in his hand. If they were in Jiuzhou, such a few Yao cores would be nothing to anyone, but now they seemed precious. This is not the time to be even. At the same level of cultivation, your strength is far above mine. So let's focus on helping you recover first. This way, both of us will be safe. Otherwise, I wouldn't be so generous. Besides, it's not like I've come up empty-handed. I'm going to try some food. Help me put away the ape meat. You really want to eat it? Li Qingshan was surprised. The broken limbs and blood on the snow could make even gluttons lose their appetite, and the white ape king's corpse on the ground looked very much like a human. It might not taste as bad as it looks, but it's still spiritual meat, so it's worth a try. Let's go find the white ape king's cave before the snow covers our tracks. As he spoke, the snowstorm grew stronger. The pieces were like goose feathers, moving up and down with the wind. The world was chaotic. Li Qingshan didn't waste any time. He conjured a big bag and swept all the ape demons' corpses into it. Then he carried Gu Yenying and flew into the wind, disappearing into the snow. All that was left was a vast expanse of white snow covering the blood and ruins. Li Qingshan opened his eyes wide and searched hard. The ape demons moved quickly and left very few traces. Plus, they were in the middle of a snowstorm, so it was especially difficult to find them. The cold was pervasive and deep. Li Qingshan hadn't felt such a chill in a long time, and Gu Yenying's lips were blue from the cold. If this went on, she would fall seriously ill. She had to use the divine talisman of great creation to create a warm current. Try to save energy. Don't be so warm. The hot wind, hell still makes me feel warm. Gu Yenying snuggled up to Li Qingshan, using each other's body heat to keep warm. Warm? Li Qingshan shook his head. This was an insult to hell. He felt a burning pain in his soul, as if he had fallen in the middle of a desert, and the water in his body was being smoked dry. Yet he remained clear-headed. If there was no obsession, even death would be close to freedom. But what was truly warm was the soft body under her thin shirt. The wind and snow howled, and the world was in chaos. It was as if the two of them were the only ones left in the world, refused to accept fate against the whole world. This feeling could not be described with words. Li Qingshan lowered his head and glanced at her. Her handsome smile was a little stiff from the cold, but she was still smiling. Like the spring breeze in March, his pair of eagle eyes were still firm, but his true feelings were hard to detect. Watch where you're going. Gu Yenying looked back at him. The snowstorm is too strong, so the trail has been cut off, Li Qingshan said. Let's think of another way. Don't forget our agreement. We're only friends, not lovers. I can't forget it. You should stop feeling so good about yourself, Li Qingshan said disdainfully. I'm just reminding you. After all, a man and a woman are living together in the same world. However, I believe that we are not people who are affected by the environment. Are you saying that to yourself? Yeah, Gu Yenying said calmly. Even if they could go through life and death together, she had to keep her heart to herself. Understood. Li Qingshan waved his hand, and the divine talisman of great creation shone with seven-colored brilliance. A black spirit dog materialized and landed lightly on the snowy ground. Its sharp nose sniffed around, and then it went into the forest. The 1,000-foot-high mountain cut through the wind and snow, pointing straight to the sky. There was a flickering light on the top of the mountain, like a star guiding the way, but it was a brightly lit villa on the precipice of the south peak. For words were carved, the world's sword sect. Everyone who came here for the first time would be amazed by the incredible sword skills of the person who carved the words and the heroic spirit of looking down on the world. However, there were exceptions today, and there were two of them. This white ape sure talks big, Li Qingshan said. In this world, he probably lives up to his name. At the Qi practitioner level, demons have a clear advantage in terms of physique. Add that to his innate magical powers and his intelligence that is not inferior to that of humans, and I'm afraid it will be hard to find a match for him. Yes, but in a world with such thin spirit Qi, it's not easy to nurture such a monster. Li Qingshan rode the wind and landed in front of the villa's gate. The gate was huge, and there were 81 nails on the gate, giving off the aura of an emperor. However, what sat in front of the gate was not a stone lion, but a pair of stone apes. There was a faint power shrouding the whole villa, he said in surprise. There's actually a formation, but it's very low level. It's enough to deal with Qi practitioners. Here, this is a formation plate, but I'm afraid you have to go to the eye of the formation first before you can replace its owner. Gu Yenying took out the formation plate from the White Ape King's waist and confirmed that there was no such thing as 100 treasures pouch in this world. Otherwise, the White Ape King would have it. The difference between this world and the 9 states was not that all beings above Qi practitioner were removed, but that the entire way of cultivation was backward. I'll go call the door. HM? There's no need. The vermilion gate suddenly opened, and dozens of shadows swayed inside. Firelight reflected off the snowy ground, dragging the shadows of Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying behind them. Who dares trespass into our ape deity villa without permission? The middle-aged man in the lead shouted. His face was fiery red, and his voice was as loud as a bell. The short beard under his chin was very finely trimmed, adding a touch of elegance to his appearance. He was the world-famous Marquis of the Blazing Flames sword, Ho Hong Tao, a grandmaster of the sword at the 9th tier of the innate level. He was bewildered by the two people in front of him, not knowing how they had passed through the many hidden checkpoints on the mountain road to get here in this snowstorm. An expert like him would naturally not take the mountain road, and would directly ride his sword up. However, these two obviously looked like ordinary people, and they were carrying such a large cloth bag on their backs. Moreover, the cloth bag reeked of blood. They had come with ill intentions. Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying looked at each other. They did not expect there to be so many humans in the White Ape King's lair, but it was exactly what they wanted. With more people, they would be able to quickly understand the world around them. Do you still want to speak? Li Qingshan asked Gu Yenying. You do it. All right. After their encounter with the White Ape King, it was clear that the gentle approach was not very suitable, so they might as well show their strength. With a wave of Li Qingshan's hand, the cloth bag disappeared, and the severed limbs scattered on the ground. The most intact part was the White Ape King's corpse. That is, the crowd was in an uproar, and they all retreated. Your Highness. Ho Hong Tao was the only one who did not move. He stared at the White Ape King's corpse as if he was possessed, and muttered, No, this is impossible. The world-famous White Ape King had led his subordinates out of the villa for less than a day, and yet it had ended up in such a tragic state. The image of the demon star streaking across the sky brought a phrase to everyone's mind. The demon star descends, bringing disaster to the world. Hey, this old ape is still a king. From today onwards, this place is under our control, and you are all my subordinates, Li Qingshan announced in a loud voice as he stepped forward. The crowd retreated again, their faces filled with fear. I will guard the Ape Deity Villa on behalf of the White Ape King. If you dare take another step forward, don't blame me for being rude. Ho Hong Tao's heart was thumping wildly as he stood firmly in place, his hand gripping the blazing sword at his waist. He had already calmed down, and a most logical conjecture came to him. Do you think you can scare us with a mere illusion? Yes, it must be an illusion. Your Highness is wise. It's another trick of the demonic path. The swordsmen all came to their senses and drew their swords. You say this is an illusion? Li Qingshan had a strange expression on his face. Were the bastards of this world really that unmoved by force or persuasion? Did they really want him to go on a killing spree? I didn't expect the Phantom Dancer to have a successor, but to come up with such a laughable illusion. Doesn't he know that even if that old witch came personally, she wouldn't be able to harm a single hair on the Ape King's head? Ho Hong Tao was more and more convinced of his judgment. He glanced at the ape corpses on the ground with contempt. It would have been fine if they had been poisoned. Although the chances of that happening were pitifully small, it was still easier to accept. However, it was impossible for them to have been torn to shreds with such a heavy hand. Moreover, the biggest loophole was not this, but the beauty of the woman. Compared to her, the beauties collected from all over the world in the White Ape King's palace were like ordinary cosmetics. How could there be such a stunning beauty in this world? The only explanation was an illusion. At this thought, he couldn't help but take a few more glances. Fake. Everything is fake. Kill these two demonic remnants. Someone shouted proudly. I'm so tired. I really can't communicate with them anymore. Li Qingshan let out a long sigh. If you don't believe me, you can come and check. Gu Yenying shrugged helplessly. Don't go, Your Highness. Who knows what's going on? Yeah, let's kill them first. Forget it. Let's go in first. Li Qingshan pulled Gu Yenying and rushed through the door. He clenched and opened his right hand, ready to slay the dragon. The forest of swords seemed to repeat the scene, just now. Without Ho Hongtao's order, no one dared to make the first move. Ho Hongtao stared coldly at the approaching Li Qingshan. The hand holding the sword ignited with a flame. "I don't care what kind of demon or ghost you are, I'll cut you down with my sword." However, a trace of uneasiness gradually welled up in his heart. Compared to the woman's stunning beauty, the man's appearance was nothing special. His body could only be considered tall, and he seemed to have practiced some external hard body skills. From beginning to end, there was nothing frightening about him. However, in the flickering flame, he exuded an indescribable demonic aura. "I advise you not to try. I'm in a bad state right now, so I can't hold back," Li Qingshan said sincerely and walked past Ho Hongtao. With a clanging sound, the flame suddenly appeared. More than half of the raging fire sword was unsheathed. To everyone's surprise, Ho Hongtao, who was like a raging fire, arrogant than a noble, did not make a move in the end. His face was flushed red. Only a few people noticed that the moment he passed by, Li Qingshan put his fingers together like a sword and made a gesture. After a moment of contemplation, his face also changed. Ho Hongtao ordered, "You two go and check carefully. The illusion is not completely flawless, and it can't be maintained forever." The two braced themselves and went forward to check back and forth for a while. They said in a daze, "Your Highness, it doesn't seem like it's not an illusion." Chapter 1171. "What? That's impossible. Did you two see it clearly? If you don't believe me, come and see for yourself." Seeing that they hadn't fallen for any evil trap, the crowd walked up and picked up the broken limbs one by one. They couldn't tell that it was fake at all. The White Ape King's corpse was the only one that no one dared to touch. Even they shuddered at the sight of that hideous and horrifying death, and they tried their best to keep their distance from it. Everyone's expression changed as they subconsciously gripped the hilts of their swords. The formation above the villa flashed. The master of the formation had changed. Ho Hongtao laughed bitterly. His smile was even uglier than a cry. If the White Ape King was still alive, it would never have given the formation to anyone. This was the best proof. But he still wondered if he was having a nightmare. "What should we do, Lord Ho?" Everyone had a panicked expression on their faces. There was no lack of sword heroes amongst them, and they were usually people who killed without batting an eyelid. But everything that had happened tonight had exceeded their imaginations, and it was to the point that they were all thrown into confusion. The White Ape King is dead, and the Ape Deity Villa is destroyed. Let's hurry. But with such a heavy snowstorm, where do we go? If we get lost, we'll be in trouble. It's strange. This year's snowstorm came too early, and it's so fierce. It's like the heavens are angry. Could it be that the two just now, they suddenly stopped talking? There seemed to be a giant beast hiding in the snow, occupying the sky above the Ape Deity Villa. It was ready to pounce at any time. Or rather, this feeling was not an illusion. Ho Hongtao gritted his teeth. "Don't talk nonsense. How can humans interfere with the power of heaven? Let's go back." But if they wanted to do something, they would have done it long ago. "I'd like to see where they came from. Our origins have nothing to do with you. You just have to obey me like you obey the White Ape King." The magnificent hall was as warm as spring or summer. Charcoal fires burned in the walls, and all the decorations were luxurious. The only thing that looked a little plain was a throne made of 1,000 swords. But it was more famous than any of the decorations. Every sword had its own story, a master who had been defeated by the White Ape King's sword. Li Qingshan laid down on it lazily, gazing at the beautiful patterns on the ceiling in a daze. Ever since he clashed with the King of Feathermen until now, danger at every step. He finally had a chance to catch his breath. He would rather relax. Gu Yenying stood to the side, fiddling with a metal fan that she had found in the White Ape King's secret chamber. There was a mechanism inside that could shoot out sharp, hidden weapons. It was a pretty good defensive item. She had already discussed with Li Qingshan that she would not reveal her origins for the time being, lest rumors such as the arrival of the Fiend Star, the world will be in chaos spread, and she would become the public enemy of the world. I am Ho Hongtao. My fellow martial artists have given me the elegant title of Blazing Sword Marquis. I haven't asked for your names yet. Ho Hongtao introduced himself, hoping that the fierce flame sword marquis would attract the other party's attention. To his disappointment, the other party did not respond at all. I am Li Qingshan. People call me Descending Tiger in the martial world. When Li Qingshan heard that others had nicknames, he couldn't have none either. He couldn't help but think of his original nickname, which suited his current situation. This was not just descending the mountain, but descending to the lower world. If it were any other time and place, Ho Hongtao would have laughed out loud. Even a thief would not use a vulgar nickname like Descending Tiger, and the so-called people call me by the martial world was just trying to flatter themselves. Who would remember such a person? But now, no matter how hard they tried, they could not bring themselves to laugh. Not a single person could. The White Ape King's corpse was still laid out in the courtyard. Those who had the guts and the qualifications to enter this hall were all innate stage masters, people who had run amok for a while. They all wore serious expressions. What was about to happen here would probably completely disrupt the situation in the northern region and even the whole world. It might even go down in history. Gu Yenying, the soaring eagle. Gu Yenying smiled slightly. She looked tired, but just as relaxed as Li Qingshan. Hey, when did you get that nickname? Why aren't you called Soaring Eagle? Since you copied me, you should have copied it neatly. Li Qingshan looked at Gu Yenying, the shameless pirate, with a face full of dissatisfaction. This is called the pupil surpassing the master. Your nickname isn't impressive enough. Gu Yenying looked up at the sky. Adding the word God makes it impressive? You really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Li Qingshan slapped the armrest, a look of exasperation on his face. If this place can be called the Ape Deity Villa, why can't I be called Soaring Eagle? Then I'll be called the Descending Tiger. Forget it. Adding the word demon is too uncouth, and it doesn't make sense. I'll just be called the Descending Tiger. Li Qingshan gave up on the idea of changing his name. He announced proudly, the Descending Tiger, Li Qingshan. Remember this. Yes. Ho Hongtao was stunned when he heard this. He forgot what he was going to say. The masters behind him were also dumbfounded. Was this the time to talk about nicknames? Were these the two people who were going to influence the world? The Inferno Sword Monkey, right? Although you don't look like a monkey, you're barely passable. If that old ape was as smart as you, he wouldn't have died. He glanced at Gu Yenying again. Some people really think they're gods just because they have the word God in their nicknames. No, it's the Ho of the Marquis. Ho Hongtao couldn't help but correct himself, feeling that the atmosphere had become even weirder. There had been people who joked that he should change his name to the Inferno Sword Monkey because he hung out with the White Ape King all day. Of course, he died a horrible death, but now he couldn't do anything about it. The other party obviously didn't mean to humiliate him, because even the Inferno Sword Monkey was much better than the Descending Tiger. Is that so? Li Qingshan suddenly understood. I was wondering if it was a monkey, it wouldn't be its face that's red. Ho Hongtao's face became even redder. All right. I was just joking to lighten the mood. I'm going to blush. Gu Yenying put her hand to her forehead, suddenly feeling a little embarrassed. Humph, at least you have some sense of shame. Li Qingshan glanced at her. Let's listen to what Brother Ho has to say. Ho Hongtao took a deep breath. You're mistaken, sir. We're not the White Ape King's subordinates. We're just here to learn the sword. As it turned out, although the White Ape King was a demon, he was fond of human beauty and was unwilling to be a hermit. As long as someone presented him with a generous gift, be it rare treasures, fine wine, or beautiful women, he would be willing to give them pointers in swordsmanship. He didn't care about good or evil, and he didn't accept disciples. No matter what sect it was, anyone could come here to learn from him without having to worry about sectarian bias. Swordsmen came here to exchange pointers and spar. The Ape Deity Mountain Villa had become a holy land for swordsmen. Many swordsmen spent years preparing gifts to come here to learn the sword. This was a grand event that everyone in the world knew about. Ho Hongtao finished his story in one breath, and he couldn't help but sigh. Li Qingshan seemed to be in a trance. After a while, he said, Chapter 1172. Ho Hongtao choked on his breath, his face flushed red. He could not hold it in any longer. Are you listening to me or not? Or are you treating us like we're nothing? Li Qingshan laughed loudly, his voice shaking the hall. Although there was no aura in it, there was a kind of heroic spirit. Reading the latest novel, I said that because I heard you. As the saying goes, when the tiger is away, the monkey is king. You guys only know how to respect the monkey, but you don't know how to fear the tiger. Isn't that ridiculous? Ho Hongtao's expression fluctuated. He had to admit this, but there was still an inexplicable emotion that he could not accept. He argued, Perhaps the White Ape King is just a monkey in your eyes, sir, but its existence is beneficial to us. What benefit do you have to us, sir? He pointed behind him. Do you know what price they paid to come here to learn swordsmanship? Now they've all been destroyed by your hands. The swordsmen were moved to hear this. Lord Ho is still speaking up for us. How can we cower? This is the holy land of all swordsmen. It belongs to all swordsmen. If you want to replace the White Ape King as the master of the villa, you need all of us to agree. I think Lord Ho is the best candidate. I am willing to recommend Lord Ho as the new master. What do you all think? Good. I support you. Since you're a tiger coming down from the mountain, why don't you go back to where you came from? For a moment, the crowd was so excited that they disregarded life and death. Even the swordsmen outside the hall, whose strength had not reached the innate stage, rushed in. They all had their hands on the hilt of their swords, as if they would drive Li Qingshan down the mountain if he dared to say no. Ho Hongtao had just been unable to hold back his anger, but now he could not help but feel his heart burn. If he could become the new master, with his popularity, he could make the Ape Deity Villa the strongest sword sect in the north. No, it would not be the Ape Deity Villa, but the Deity Sword Villa, and the wealth that the White Ape King had spent 100 years accumulating, the beauties in his harem, and the vast amount of resources. All of it would belong to him. A man born in this world. What else could he ask for? Gradually, it overwhelmed his fear. But he did not realize that he was not such a fickle person. Since he could not draw his sword at the door, why was he provoked by the crowd? What if he changed his mind? On this lonely peak shrouded in snow and wind, in the magnificent hall, heaven's will was still everywhere, affecting everything without a trace. Damn it, I'll be more polite to you. You dare to talk to me about democracy? I'm giving you face, but you don't want it. Do you really think that ferocious beasts don't eat people? Li Qingshan raised his thick eyebrows. When the White Ape King was around, he did not believe that this bunch of wretched wretches would dare mention anything about electing a new manor lord. Do you really think that I, Li Qingshan, am that easy to bully? Ho Hongtao's heart skipped a beat. He almost didn't dare to look at that pair of angry eyes. There was a faint trace of regret in his heart, but at this moment, he had no way to back down. He made up his mind. If these two really have such great strength, why haven't they revealed it all this time? Perhaps they fought a fierce battle with the White Ape King and were also heavily injured. They also had nowhere to go in the blizzard, so they came here to hide from the wind and snow. If we give them the chance to recuperate, then they will miss this heaven-sent opportunity. Li Qingshan suddenly stood up and clenched his right hand, ready to chop these bastards to death. Seeing that the hall was about to become a slaughterhouse again, Gu Yenying coughed twice, attracting everyone's attention. She smiled and patted Li Qingshan on the shoulder. Li Qingshan's mouth twitched. Gu Yenying spread her hands. Although she was speaking in riddles, her meaning was very clear. You're doing it again. There's no way to communicate with these bastards. It's better to kill them all. It's easy to kill them, but I'm afraid that the slightest move will affect the whole situation and cause more trouble. Li Qingshan sat down again, hoping that she could communicate successfully this time. Gu Yenying looked back at the swordsman and sighed. Why do you all have to do this? We suffered some injuries when we killed the White Ape King, so we don't want to fight again to avoid aggravating our injuries. But if we really do fight, who among you can walk out alive? Especially you, Marquis Sword of the Blaze. If you unsheath your sword, we will definitely use the formation to suppress you and kill you first. No matter who the new manor lord is, it will not be your turn. Not only was she not bluffing, she even lied about being injured, because although what Li Qingshan said was true, it was far beyond the imagination of these people, making it difficult for them to believe him. To scare a bunch of rats, only a cat was needed. A tiger was unnecessary. Who do you think here is afraid of death? That's right, we will not be threatened. Although Ho Hongtao's tone was firm, his heart was beating like a drum. The other swordsmen were also somewhat hesitant. Although Gu Yenying's words were all lies, they actually seemed reasonable. Two Xiantian realm experts, even if they were seriously injured, could still drag everyone here to hell with them. And her charm seemed to greatly reduce the inexplicable malice these people felt. If she stood still, no one would dare to kill her. We have to convince people with virtue and reason, not force them to do so. Everyone is here to learn swordsmanship, not to fight to the death. Take a look at this. Gu Yenying fished out a thick book from her sleeve and casually flipped through it. She had no idea what kind of leather it was made from, but every single page was as thin as a cicada's wing. It was filled with tiny regular script, and there were many beautiful drawings as well, all of which depicted the White Ape Sword dance. White Ape Sword technique. Yuan Hongtao's eyes widened. In an instant, everyone's eyes were firmly drawn to it, their eyes filled with passion, like a pervert seeing a beauty, a miser finding a gold mine, or a drunkard smelling good wine. Some people could not help but take 2 steps forward before coming to their senses. Over the past 100 years, the White Ape King had constantly learned from others while teaching others sword techniques, and combined it with his own understanding of swordsmanship. He had written the White Ape Sword technique. He had also once boasted to everyone that the most exquisite sword techniques in the world were all gathered in this book, like rivers flowing into the sea. If this book were to spread, all the sword manuals in the world could be burned. If the Ape Deity Mountain Villa was the holy land for all swordsmen, then the White Ape Sword technique would be the holy scripture for all swordsmen. Of course, no one would casually pass on their ultimate technique. Even their closest kin had to keep it a secret. As a result, everyone knew about the existence of this book, but not a single person had seen it with their own eyes. That's right. It's the world-renowned ultimate sword technique, the white ape sword technique. Gu Yenying's expression was solemn, but Li Qingshan noticed the corner of her lips curl slightly. Of course, they had found it in the White Ape King's secret room. They had flipped through it casually, but it was not very valuable. It was not even as good as the introductory sword techniques of the Sword Collection Palace. Li Qingshan had even mocked back then. Monkeys dancing around with tree branches. How dare they call themselves the sword sect of the world, and they've even written it in such a tedious book. What a joke! Then he casually tossed it aside. He did not notice that Gu Yenying had picked it up again. Well, what do you mean by this? This belongs to the Ape Deity Mountain Villa. Please. Ho Hongtao's eyes were extremely sharp. While Gu Yenying was flipping through the book, Ho Hongtao could clearly see many words and pictures. He could clearly see many words and pictures. They were indeed exquisite beyond compare, and were definitely not forged. There was a ripping sound. Gu Yenying grabbed a page and tore it forcefully. Ah! Stop! Almost everyone cried out, as if they had been slashed by a knife. Since we've become the new masters of this place, we naturally have to shoulder the responsibilities of the old masters and pass on sword techniques to everyone. It's a pity that we don't cultivate the way of the sword, so we can only let everyone study it on their own. Gu Yenying smiled as she casually tossed aside the torn page. Please verify its authenticity first, Marquis, before pasting it on the screen wall outside. Pasting it on the screen wall? Ho Hongtao held the thin page of the book in both hands, wondering if he had misheard. This was the White Ape swordplay method. Even if he were to become the new Heights Lord, he would never show this book to anyone, let alone tear it down and stick it on the wall. For people in the martial arts world, it was better to let someone sleep with their wife than to hand over the secret book to others. Yes, we don't cultivate the way of the sword, so this book is of no use to us. It would be a waste to hide it in the secret room. Therefore, I'm prepared to pass on the White Ape swordplay method to everyone. What do you think? Everyone looked as if they had been hit by a pie. They were so happy that they could not believe it. Who would object? In the martial arts world, there were too many cases of people fighting to the death for a secret manual, which secret manual could be compared to the White Ape sword technique. Moreover, there was no risk involved. How could there be such a good thing in this world? You want to make the White Ape swordplay method public? Ho Hongtao asked. Yes, everyone, including the maids and servants, can read it at will. If anyone dares to obstruct, anyone can kill them immediately. You'll be responsible for this matter, but you have to keep a close eye on it. If you lose it, it'll be gone forever. It's best to pass it around and make copies for everyone. Gu Yenying said very considerately. In the eyes of the swordsman, she was like a goddess descending. Ho Hongtao felt that all eyes were focused on him. It was completely different from the way they looked at him when they elected him as the master just now. He held the thin page as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. His heart was still unwilling. If it's just a page, I don't think it's a big deal. You'd better take it back. Of course, it's not just a page. It's just that the White Ape swordplay method is broad and profound. In order to prevent everyone from going crazy, it has to be released slowly. I promise to update it every day. Tomorrow will be the second page, and the day after tomorrow will be the third page until the whole book is released. What do you think? Your Excellency is very scheming. You actually want to use such a book to control all of us. Ho Hongtao said coldly. Gu Yenying let out a long sigh. I've done it out of good intentions, yet I still have to be criticized like this. If that's the case, I'm willing to abdicate and give the position of the Manor Lord to you. The White Ape sword scripture is also yours, so you can give it to whoever you want. Qingshan, let's go. Both of you, please stay. I'm willing to serve you as the master of the manor. Yes, we need two generous and righteous masters. The two Xian Tian masters looked at each other and changed their minds. If this white ape swordplay technique were to fall into Ho Hongtao's hands, it would be difficult for even his father to take a look at it, let alone outsiders like them. The swordsmen who were not strong enough were especially excited. Ho Hongtao did not care about this page, but they did. Regardless of what would happen in the future, they would first get to eat this piece of meat. Gu Yenying winked at Li Qingshan and stared at Ho Hongtao. What else do you have to say? If you still object, we will leave now. We will not stay. Ho Hongtao felt a chill in his heart. Now that the people's morale was gone, the opponent only needed to activate the formation to suppress him. Then, with a casual strike, he would be dead. Even if the opponent really left, no one would stop him. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the white ape swordplay method. There was bound to be an extremely tragic and bloody battle in this hall. This was because no matter who obtained the white ape swordplay method, they would never share it with anyone else. In the end, only one person would be able to walk out of this hall, and the other would only need to make a detour before coming back. In that case, I'm also willing to serve you as the new master of the manor. I hope you can keep your promise. Otherwise, we will not let this matter rest. Of course, but I also hope that everyone will know their place, supervise each other, and wait for the updates. If anyone has ill intentions and intends to monopolize this white ape swordplay method, then I will be the first to not let him off. All right, we have to go back to recuperate. Everyone, please take your time to study the first page of the swordplay manual. Gu Yenying pulled Li Qingshan out of the hall and returned to the manor's backyard. The young swordsman reluctantly watched as she left. They felt a deep hatred for Li Qingshan, but soon their attention was attracted by the first page of the swordplay manual. Master Ho, quickly let us see the white ape swordplay method. What's the hurry? I will first verify its authenticity. Ho Hongtao's face was stiff as he carefully studied it. Everyone cursed. Didn't you look down on this page of the swordplay manual? A gust of cold wind blew snowflakes on her face. Gu Yenying sneezed and rubbed her nose. She smiled and said, "Heaven's will and man's will. How interesting." Hey, we are now carrying our own mockery. These people have not noticed that they are being driven by heaven's will. Who cannot be affected by the environment? Now, try to solve it in a gentle way. These are all your future readers. That's true. Manor Lord, Madam Manor Lord, you have finally come out. I was worried to death. A middle-aged woman rushed up to greet them. Her charming face was full of worry and concern, and she was holding two large cloaks in her hands. You are? Li Qingshan was surprised. He did not know this woman at all. He vaguely remembered seeing her just now when he had rushed into the backyard to control the formation. I am Yuan Feifei. I am in charge of the backyard of the manor. I will be responsible for the manor lord and madam's daily necessities. I will make sure you are satisfied. Yuan Feifei carefully observed the situation. She was originally the White Ape King's concubine. Later on, she grew old and became the steward of the inner yard. She and Yuan Hongtao were in charge of the interior and exterior of the manor. However, although she was also skilled in martial arts, her strength was much weaker. She had almost reached the innate level, and she had relied almost entirely on pleasing the White Ape King to secure her position. Now that the White Ape King was dead, she was naturally anxious to serve and protect her position. Who said that heaven's will can control man's heart? As the saying goes, man can conquer nature. Isn't this a real example? Li Qingshan smiled as he took the cloak and draped it over Gu Yenying. Gu Yenying also laughed. In the end, it is only an influence. There is no way to completely distort it. Otherwise, this would be the Azura realm. Yuan Fei looked puzzled, not knowing what they were talking about. To be continued. Chapter 1173. Gu Yenying said, "All right, you'll still be in charge of the backyard of the villa, but I'm not the wife of the villa master. I'm the vice villa master." "Thank you, villa masters. I'll do my best to serve you in the future. If there's anything you need, just let me know. Don't think that this is a bitter and cold place in the northern region. In terms of food and clothing, even the leader of the martial arts world can't compare with us." Yuan Fei was full of smiles. She didn't expect them to be so easygoing and not arrogant at all. It seemed that they were easier to deal with than the old ape. "I just want to take a comfortable bath and drink a few cups of wine," Li Qingshan said. "What kind of wine would you like to drink, Villa Master? We have Thousand Leaves Spring from the southern region, Red Jade from the western region." Yuan Fei casually listed more than 10 kinds of wine, all of which were century-old. "I want all of them." Villa Master is very knowledgeable. "What about you, Vice Villa Master? Ask the kitchen to cook the ape's meat." "I want to eat it later," Gu Yenying said. Yuan Fei's expression changed slightly. "Yes, I'll prepare it now." Then she hurriedly retreated, her footsteps light and silent, showing her extraordinary lightness skill. However, at the corner of the corridor, she slipped on the snow and almost hit her head on the pillar if she didn't react fast enough and used her hand to support herself. She cursed in a low voice and thought, "I've really neglected my martial arts recently." Looking at this familiar scene, Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying looked at each other. Could it be that their bad luck was contagious? "It seems that whoever stands on our side, even if it's just hypocritical, will be implicated," Gu Yenying said in a low voice. "If they're sincere, won't they be cursed to death by us? Is this the legendary sky-cursed Lone Star?" "Villa Masters, Steward Yuan asked me to take you to the pool." As they spoke, a woman in red came to lead the way with a lantern. In the steaming hot air, Li Qingshan held a green jade wine cup and soaked himself in the pool made of white jade. He let out a long breath. For beautiful women, each with their own merits, knelt behind him. They held wine pots, round fans, and other objects in their hands. Once the wine cup was empty, they would immediately refill it and gently fan it. She was wearing a thin gauze dress. Her graceful figure was faintly visible. Li Qingshan had never been a gentleman who would not let go of the opportunity to enjoy himself. But now he was just drinking cup after cup of wine, because Gu Yenying was sitting on the other side of the pool. He soaked his bare feet in the water. She was looking at him with a smile. "You can pretend that I don't exist and do whatever you want." She didn't have any power to protect herself, and even a fall could be fatal. He couldn't leave Li Qingshan's sight. "I can pretend that you don't exist, but they can't pretend that you don't exist, especially when you're holding that damn thing. Who would be interested?" Li Qingshan burped, his eyes a little blurred. There was at least one advantage to being in this world, and that was getting drunk very quickly. But the 4 beauties behind him looked terrified, their movements stiff, and they didn't dare to look in Gu Yenying's direction. "This monkey brain tastes pretty good. Do you want to try it?" Gu Yenying held the head of the white ape king in her arms, holding a silver spoon in her hand. She ate mouthful by mouthful, her movements still elegant and calm. Monkey brains were the easiest to cook, and this was the first dish that the villa's kitchen had sent to Gu Yenying. They seemed to feel that there was a deeper meaning to it, and they made it very carefully. The head had already been processed, and only white bones were left. The skull had also been opened, and it looked like a strangely shaped container. The monkey brain was as tender as tofu, and after a simple cooking with hot oil, it gave off a strong fragrance, but the malevolent and resentful aura could not be dispelled. Contrasting with her beautiful face, it gave off a strange and terrifying aura, like a scene that could only be seen in nightmares. Sure, Li Qingshan laughed. She had already killed it, so why wouldn't she dare to eat it? Catch! The White Ape King's head was thrown over, and a few screams came from behind Li Qingshan. The four beauties retreated in panic, the wine jug toppling over, the round fan falling to the ground. This was the person they had been serving all this time, and now he had become food in someone else's mouth. Was there anything crueler than this? One of the women even lay on the ground and retched, her face covered in snot and tears. Li Qingshan caught the head, glanced at it out of the corner of his eye, and shook his head. We've really become monsters. It would have been fine if it had been a cruel and tyrannical mood, as it was nothing more than a twisted, morally bankrupt lunatic. But in reality, they did not see it as a big deal. It was nothing more than an attempt to recover their strength, and at most they felt a little disgusted. Hee, I was born a monster with extraordinary talent. You have to thank for your hard work. Gu Yenying put her hands on the edge of the pool and raised her body, her long hair reaching the ground. Thank you for the compliment. It really does taste good. Li Qingshan laughed and swept the monkey brain clean. He then picked up the wine jug, filled the skull, and drank it in one gulp. He waved his hand and said, "You can all leave." The four women felt as if they had been pardoned and fled through the door. In a warm room, Yuan Feifei asked about the situation and gave them 4 slaps on their faces. She scolded, "Bitches, how dare you disrespect the 2 manor masters? Where's the etiquette I usually teach you?" The woman in red who led the way for Li Qingshan said, "Chief, please forgive us. We were really scared. You didn't see it when they ate. It was like eating normal food. It felt like we didn't know when they would open our heads and eat it." Slap. Another slap to the face, causing the woman in red to see stars. Call the manor masters. Yuan Feifei pondered for a moment, and her expression changed. Don't blame me for being too ruthless. I'm doing this for your own good. It's getting late. You should go and rest. She then looked in the direction of the pool. Li Qingshan, Gu Yenying, where did you come from? The 4 women covered their red and swollen faces with a belly full of resentment and left the warm room. The woman in red said, "Wait for me in my room. I'll go outside and ask about the situation." After a while, the woman in red returned to her room and carefully closed the door. She took out a piece of paper that was still wet and said excitedly, "I have something good for you." Sister Feihong, what is this? The girl in yellow asked. This is the first page of the White Ape Swordplay technique. That ape spirit bragged a lot about it. The White Ape Swordplay technique. The 3 women exclaimed at the same time. This world was full of martial arts. They also had inner force, but it was only for the sake of maintaining their appearance and beauty. They were not allowed to learn martial arts, let alone have the opportunity to learn such advanced martial arts. Where did you get it? You still don't know, but something big happened in the outer yard. The woman in red explained and suddenly laughed. That old ape said he was invincible. Now, not only was his clan exterminated, even his brains were eaten by someone. This is retribution. Sister Feihong, don't talk about it. I still feel disgusted when I think about it. But if Chief finds out, when we learn this peerless sword technique, do we still have to be afraid of that old witch? Who are you calling an old witch? Suddenly, Yuan Feifei's gloomy voice came from outside the door. The 4 women's expressions changed. To be continued. Chapter 1174. Li Qingshan used the skull to drink all of the alcohol, so he was already completely drunk. He used everything he had to crawl out of the pool. The clear water flowed down his bronze, robust body. He had not been drunk like this for many years. As his cultivation continued to grow, no matter how much wine he drank, there would always be a trace of sobriety in his mind. It was difficult for him to indulge so thoroughly. However, he did not become weak because of this. On the contrary, he became more dangerous than ever. If those swordsmen dared to anger him at this time, they would see what was called ferocity. Gu Yenying did not shy away from him, let alone show any emotion similar to shyness. She looked him up and down, and came to him through the hazy heat. She picked up the towel that was thrown on the ground and carefully wiped his body. Li Qingshan suddenly held her hand, and his eyes were burning like fire. Gu Yenying silently looked at him, as quiet as the sky. Li Qingshan seemed to see himself in it. He slowly let go of her hand, closed his eyes, and fell asleep. Gu Yenying acted as if nothing had happened. She put the cloak on him, sat cross-legged beside him, and took out a geographical atlas to study. Compared with the white ape swordplay, books about the geography and history of this world were what she urgently needed. The books were piled high. Unknowingly, the sky was bright, and the snow reflected the paper window. She yawned and had a general grasp of the situation. This world was indeed much smaller than the 9 states. It was less than 10,000 miles in length and width, and was roughly divided into 5 regions: Eastern Region, Western Region, Southern Region, Northern Region, and Central Region. The geographical features were slightly similar to the 9 states. It was also cold in the north and hot in the south. However, the mountains and rivers were much smaller. Was there any inexplicable connection between these worlds? This question was not something that she could explore at the moment. There was almost no concept of cultivation in this world. The most popular was martial arts rather than spells. Killing and fighting were more important than self-cultivation. After thinking about it for a while, he understood the reason. The power of Qi practitioners' spells was too limited by the spiritual Qi of heaven and earth, and the speed of casting spells was much slower than close combat. Naturally, they were eliminated in the battles. The Qi practitioners of the 9 provinces did not pay much attention to fighting and killing methods because the Foundation establishment cultivators, who knew nothing about fighting and killing, could kill a Qi practitioner with a snap of their fingers. The only way to win was to continuously raise their cultivation level. But there were also many similarities. Transcending the tribulation and ascending was their ultimate goal. This place was also known as the Void-Shattering Realm, and the powerful ones still dominated this world. Although they did not form an absolute rule like the Great Xia dynasty, they only formed a loose alliance with a few big sects and families as the backbone. The chief of Wulin was constantly being replaced to maintain the so-called righteous path of Wulin. From time to time, they would join forces to fight against evil. Rather than saying that justice triumphed over evil, it would be better to say that order triumphed over chaos. As for those martial arts masters and celebrities, she did not spend too much effort memorizing them. After all, the top masters were only at the level of the White Ape King. Actually, Li Qingshan's route was not necessarily unworthy of a try. He could go on a killing spree as he pleased, turning himself into the embodiment of terror and using fear to stifle hostility. A book written by a demon king might be more eye-catching than a hero. Thinking of this, she glanced at Li Qingshan. But it was better to fight with wits first before bravery. At this time, Yuan Feifei's voice sounded from outside the door. "Villa Master, your servant has something to ask of you." Li Qingshan suddenly opened his eyes, which were full of vigilance, as if he had not slept at all. But when he came back to his senses, he became lazy again. He stretched and looked at Gu Yenying, who looked exhausted. You worked hard last night. Actually, I didn't need anyone to keep watch. Even though he had fallen to such a state, his intuition, honed by hundreds of battles, still remained. If there was danger, he would be able to sense it. I'm in a hurry to learn more about this world. I have a general idea, and I'll tell you later. Gu Yenying yawned again. No rush. We have plenty of time. You should sleep for a while. We'll talk about it later. Let's see what happened. Don't forget, peace is the most precious, and we must win people over with virtue. The door opened, and Yuan Feifei could not wait to claim credit. Last night, your servant discovered a few traitors. Please deal with them. Villa Master. The wind and snow howled throughout the night, only weakening a little at dawn. The snow was thick to the ankles, and the world was pure white. For women knelt in the courtyard. They were the four beauties who had waited on him by the bathing pool last night. Their clothes were thin, but their graceful bodies were almost completely covered in snow. The woman in red, in particular, was now completely naked. She knelt naked in the snow, and her skin had already turned blue from the cold. She did not react even when someone approached. What's the meaning of this? Li Qingshan frowned. Villa Master, please take a look. These little bitches dare to secretly learn martial arts. They deserve to die 1,000 times. Yuan Feifei hurriedly handed over the page of the sword manual and added, Your servant did not even take a look at the martial arts on this page. Gu Yenying said, Did I not make myself clear last night? Everyone in the villa can learn the martial arts on this page. You can read it if you want. Naturally, it's the same for them. Yes, yes, yes. Deputy Villa Master is benevolent and righteous, but these bitches have colluded with men from the outer yard. I wonder what other shameless things they have done. Shut up. Are you the Villa Master, or am I? How dare you torture them without my permission? Are you tired of living? Li Qingshan bared his white teeth. Hee, Steward Yuan, would you have done the same when the White Ape King was here? Gu Yenying said, I'm doing this for the rules of the villa. Yuan Feifei's eyes wandered, and she lowered her head. These four women were the most beautiful in the White Ape King's inner yard. If the White Ape King was still here, she would never have dared to execute them. She had wanted to use this opportunity to properly punish them, but she did not expect her thoughts to be seen through so easily. Let me teach you the rules. Gu Yenying stretched out her hand. Yuan Feifei wanted to dodge, but did not dare. Her fingertips lightly brushed across the back of her hand, and she immediately went limp. Her mouth was wide open, but no sound came out. She stared at Gu Yenying as if she was looking at a ghost. Even the White Ape King could not endure the pain of hell, let alone her. Do you understand? Yuan Feifei nodded repeatedly. Very good. You know what to do. There will not be a next time. After Gu Yenying said this, she and Li Qingshan returned to the White Ape King's training room. Yuan Feifei got up from the ground and checked herself. There was not a single wound on her body. She did not know what kind of method the other party had used, but she did not want to experience this a second time. She did not dare to underestimate the scheming methods of the two new villa masters. She cursed back. You four bitches consider yourself lucky. The two villa masters are magnanimous and have spared your lives. Chapter 1175. The tower was isolated in the snowstorm and was located at the center of the villa. It was the core of the entire formation and also a place for cultivation. Below, it was a secret chamber deep inside the mountain, which also served as a treasure vault. Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying came to the platform at the top of the tower. The snowstorm here was particularly fierce, and the villa below them could be vaguely seen. Any further, and it would be white again. Gu Yenning tugged at her cloak. No wonder the White Ape King is so difficult to communicate with. That arrogance of his was probably cultivated here. You will reach the top and look down on all the other mountains. Occasionally, he would feel this way when he climbed the mountain, but if he were to stay at such a high place all day long, coupled with his unparalleled martial arts, his temperament would inevitably be affected. It's not a bad thing for sword cultivators to be a little arrogant, but unfortunately, there's always someone better out there. The wind and snow here are too strong. Let's go down. Don't catch a cold. From the high platform, Li Qingshan let Gu Yenying rest in the study on the second floor of the tower, while he went down alone to the deep secret chamber. It was pitch black and cold inside. Not only was there no light, but there were no heating facilities either. The White Ape King's physique was so strong that it was almost impervious to the cold and heat, so it didn't need to rely on light either. Instead, as long as there was a little light, all sorts of rare treasures in the grooves in the walls would immediately shine brilliantly. Li Qingshan didn't look at the treasures around him. He only stared at the ground beneath his feet. The mountain rock was polished to the point where one could see one's reflection, revealing fine and compact textures. There wasn't much worth paying attention to, but in his eyes, it was more attractive than any other treasure. He looked at it very seriously, even kneeling down and gently stroking it, feeling the hardness of the rock. His eyes seemed to be gazing into the distance. It passed through the mountains and reached the depths of the earth. In fact, he was different from Gu Yenying. Compared to the vast and high sky, he preferred the solid and heavy earth that could bear the weight of all things. He would never be high above others. Even if there were high mountains and steep cliffs, they were just small undulations compared to the whole earth. Even mortals could reach the top with a little effort, and they could even proudly think that they had conquered the mountains. Could it be that this world can really seal all of my power? Li Qingshan didn't believe it, and wasn't willing to just rely on the divine talisman of great creation. He took a deep breath. He silently sensed the deep earth beneath his feet. Time ticked by. The mountain rocks in the cold winter were as cold as iron. The chills seeped through the soles of his feet, and the cold blood flowed through his entire body. His body slowly stiffened. He didn't need the divine talisman of great creation for warmth. Instead, he flung his cloak to the side. His body temperature continued to drop. Gradually reaching the edge of death, the mysterious will of the heavens imprisoned everything like a strict and cold father. He still endured and didn't move, an unfilial son that would never yield. Gradually, the cold ground began to warm up, and the sturdy rocks began to soften. As if he had used a needle to pierce through some sort of barrier, a sliver of power flowed into his body from the ground beneath his feet. Although it was extremely minuscule, it was endless. It was somewhat similar to the innate divine ability, earth divine power, but it was definitely not just a divine ability. Ox Demon sinks in the mud. Different from all the other fiend god transformations, the Ox Demon transformation was where his foundation lay. From roaming the pugilistic world to dominating the world, it had always been his most powerful transformation. Now that he had cast aside all external factors, he had instead revealed some of his most intrinsic qualities. The familiar and intimate power poured into his body, purging all of the coldness as if it could not bear to see him fall into death. Although he was an unfilial son of the heavens, he was the beloved son of the earth. Li Qingshan was excited. He leaned over and kissed the ground deeply before standing up and throwing a punch. Bang! The heavy sound of air shattering echoed through the secret room. He took a step back, twisted his waist, and punched out with both fists. The Ox Demon holds the heavens. It was like he had returned to many years ago when he was a young man focused on cultivation beneath crouching Ox Hill. However, he was no longer a young man at the end of the day. Every single move was heavy and slow, imbued with the essence, chi, and soul he had condensed throughout his life. But before long, a growl rang out in the darkness. Li Qingshan was taken aback, only discovering that it was his stomach growling. He rubbed his stomach and could not help but laugh. I still have to continue drinking and eating meat. Gu Yenying slept very soundly this time. She dreamed that she was roaming through the void. It was boundless, dark, and empty, but this time she was no longer riding on the wings. Instead, she had turned into a Kuanping. When she woke up, she was still in a slight daze. She laid on the soft bed and raised the azure feather high into the air with her right hand, letting it roam about in her hand. She produced whistling sounds from her mouth, as if the wings were stirring up a fierce gale and passing through the void. "What are you doing?" Li Qingshan was amused. He was basically like a child who was daydreaming. Gu Yenying blushed for once. She stowed the Kunping feather away and sat up. "What did you do today?" "I can't tell from here." "You'll know in a moment," said Li Qingshan. His connection with the earth was still extremely weak. He could not sense it from the top of the tower. "Let's go and find something to eat." Gu Yenying also found that she was very hungry. She glanced at the hourglass and said, "It's time to publish the second page. Otherwise, those guys will be waiting anxiously." Making his way out of the tower, Gu Yenying immediately noticed Li Qingshan's changes. Every single step he took was rooted to the ground, steady and firm. He possessed a familiar sense of power. "Your strength has recovered." "A little bit. At least I'm not that weak anymore." Li Qingshan clenched his fist. "You seem to have changed a little too." "Really? I'm not as hard-working as you. I was just sleeping." "Then you should sleep more in the future." The two of them walked to the hall of the outer court. All the swordsmen were already waiting there. The noise suddenly quieted down. They looked at them with nervous and expectant eyes. Almost all of them did not sleep the whole night. They kept studying that page of the sword manual. They only felt that it was extremely exquisite and indescribable. Other than Ho Hongtao and a few other innate masters, most of the others did not even understand this page. Ho Hongtao also keenly noticed the changes in them. Especially Li Qingshan's change was the most obvious. His calm and majestic posture gave him a feeling that he could not be shaken. If they wanted to deal with them, they had already missed the best opportunity. And that page of the sword manual made everyone have no time or energy to think about other things. Li Qingshan sat on a throne made of long swords. A woman came out from the crowd and shouted, "Welcome, Villa Master!" The swordsman followed suit and said, "Welcome, Villa Master!" Li Qingshan was stunned for a moment before he recognized the woman. She was the naked woman kneeling in the snow this morning. She had changed into a tight outfit and had a long sword on her back. Her appearance was completely different. He almost couldn't recognize her with her clothes on. Seeing her pale face, he couldn't help but ask, "Are you feeling better?" "Thank you for your concern, Villa Master. I'm already much better. It's just that my three sisters' inner strength is not enough. The cold poison has invaded their bodies, and they can't stop coughing. Fei Hong, thank you for saving their lives." "That's easy." "Ho Hongtao, don't you cultivate raging fire qi? Let's treat them." Li Qingshan instructed casually. "I don't cultivate martial arts for this kind of thing." Ho Hongtao said proudly. Even the White Ape King wouldn't dare order him around like a servant. Chapter 1176. What did you say? "I told you to make a move. Don't worry, I won't use a formation to suppress you. I'll let you die knowing." Gu Yenying rolled her eyes at him. "Didn't you say peace was the most important thing? Li Qingshan smiled. Since his strength could be slowly restored, there was no need to waste the power of the divine talisman of great creation. There was no need to be so timid. Reading the latest novel, Gu Yening advised, "Brother Ho, this Uncle Li's temper is so bad that he doesn't even recognize his own family. He only asked you to save a life, which is a good deed. Why do you have to put on airs everywhere?" Ho Hongtao was so angry that he started laughing. "There's still people. I've already tolerated this bitch for daring to stand side by side with us, yet she actually wants me to waste my energy to heal them. It's simply absurd. Fine, pretend I didn't say anything." Gu Yening took a step back. If someone wanted to die, there was nothing she could do. If they are not human beings, then what are you? Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows and said angrily, "I am the Marquis of Firesword. Even the White Ape King would not humiliate me for those bitches. Shut up. If you dare compare me to that old ape again, you won't even have the chance to make a move." "Fine. I'd like to see exactly what you're capable of to actually dare to be so condescending." With a clang, the flame sword was unsheathed, reflecting the whole hall red. The temperature suddenly rose. The swordsmen were forced to retreat by the heat wave. Ho Hongtao released his Zhenqi and turned it into a raging fire, dyeing his beard and hair red. He strode toward Li Qingshan. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, his momentum rose to the extreme. Sword Qi whistled. The flame rose like a dragon's roar. The long sword turned into a bright red flame and cut toward Li Qingshan. "It's the fire dragon cut." All the swordsmen were amazed, especially the 2 Xiantian 8th stage swordsmen. They were well aware of Ho Hongtao's strength, but they hadn't expected that he would have another breakthrough. Could it be because of that 1 page of the White Ape sword technique? But he didn't know that Ho Hongtao himself was also very pleasantly surprised. The moment he attacked Li Qingshan, the circulation of his Zhenqi suddenly resonated with the world's spiritual qi, as if it had some kind of will. He had been trapped in the Xiantian 9th stage for many years. At this moment, he seemed to be on the verge of a breakthrough. He unleashed an unprecedentedly powerful attack. Seeing that Li Qingshan was sitting still, he snorted, "Humph, even the White Ape King wouldn't dare to take my sword head-on. How dare you be so careless? You're courting death." Li Qingshan slowly raised his hand. He pressed down. There was a loud bang. The hall trembled. The raging fire disappeared, and a deep handprint appeared on the ground. Ho Hongtao was lying in the center of the giant handprint. He raised his head in disbelief, wanting to say something, but spat out a mouthful of blood. All his bones and internal organs were shattered, and a trace of regret flashed in his eyes as he breathed his last. Li Qingshan gently withdrew his hand. Dealing with this kind of trash was much easier than dealing with the White Ape King, because the divine talisman of great creation's various tricks were limited by the power of this world. When faced with a top expert like the White Ape King, he would have to spend 2 or 3 moves and use some techniques. As for the weaker guys, he could just crush them with absolute power. Everyone was dumbfounded. They didn't expect that the dignified Marquis Sword of Blaze could not even take 1 move and ended up like this. Because they hadn't seen them in action before, they still had a trace of hope and contempt, but now it all vanished. If they didn't have such tricks, how could they have killed the White Ape King? My lord! Several swordsmen had always been on good terms with Ho Hongtao, and seeing this situation, they couldn't help but be furious. Anger inexplicably overwhelmed their reason, and they pulled out their swords, shouting, "Everyone, let's get revenge for my lord." "Good. I'll kill you bunch of untamed dogs." Li Qingshan sneered, and was about to start a massacre. With a tearing sound, Gu Yening tore out another page of the White Ape sword technique and shouted, "Take them down!" The 2 innate 8th-tier swordsmen looked at each other, and unsheathed their swords. With a flash of sword light, several people who were shouting for revenge were all dead on the ground. They also killed a few rioters and stabilized the situation. Thick blood flowed out and dyed the resplendent hall red. Returning their swords to their sheaths, they stepped forward and cupped their hands. Reporting to the manor lord, Ho Hongtao's remaining followers have all been beheaded. We are not on the same side as him, so please show mercy. The martial arts world had always respected the strong, and bowing to such a person was not a shameful thing. Thinking back, the other party had such power, but had always been so restrained, even taking out the white ape sword technique to give to everyone. Ho Hongtao's behavior was simply stupid, just like the saying, respect the monkey, but not the tiger. In the end, it was inevitable that he would die in the tiger's mouth. Without saying a word, Gu Yening put down the sword manual. The two of them reached out, and each grabbed one side of the manual, not giving way to the other. From today on, you are responsible for the affairs of the manor's outer court. I appoint you as the left and right protectors. The right protector thanks the manor lord. In today's world, the right was respected. One of them immediately put down the sword manual and bowed to thank the manor lord. After all, everyone could see the sword manual in the end. The other person was secretly resentful, but he could only thank the manor lord. The left protector thanks the manor lord. Reporting to the manor lord, although I don't practice the sword chi of raging fire, I can still heal the wounds of the ladies. Me too. Then I'll leave this matter to you. In the future, I don't want anyone to be punished for learning swordsmanship. I want everyone in this manor to have a chance to learn and practice martial arts. I want everyone to have the opportunity to become a peerless master. Li Qingshan opened his arms and shouted, trying to hold back his laughter. The left and right protectors hurriedly said, "The manor lord is benevolent and righteous. We will follow your orders." The normal swordsmen felt their blood boil. Who didn't want to become a peerless master? They raised their arms and shouted, "Everyone has a chance to learn and practice martial arts." The woman named Fei Hong was so touched that her eyes were brimming with tears. I will never forget Villa Master's great kindness. Pick up that sword, Li Qingshan said. Fei Hong hurriedly picked up the raging fire sword. From today on, this sword is yours. Learn the sword well, and I can see that you will definitely become a peerless master. Don't disappoint me. Yes, manor lord. Fei Hong choked with emotion. Li Qingshan finally couldn't help but laugh. I'll go back to rest. Everyone, practice the sword well. The banquet was extremely sumptuous. Li Qingshan once again drank to his heart's content. During this time, Yuan Feifei carefully came to ask if she wanted the kitchen to cook the raging fire sword marquis. Li Qingshan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He waved his hand and refused, allowing Yuan Feifei and everyone else in the manor to breathe a sigh of relief. Li Qingshan listened to Gu Yening's summary of the human geography of this world and slapped his thigh. I know what book to write now. I thought you were going to rewrite the books you wrote in the 9 states. That's where you're an amateur. The readers are completely different, Li Qingshan said proudly. Then what are you going to write? Gu Yening asked curiously. The biography of the White Ape King. Gu Yening immediately understood. I see. What a great idea. When the time comes, I'm afraid that everyone in the world will want to buy a copy. They knew next to nothing about the life of the White Ape King, but that did not matter at all. What really mattered was the White Ape sword technique. As long as the sword techniques were included in the book, would there be a need to worry that no one would buy them? Chapter 1177. Li Qingshan immediately ordered someone to bring a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone. He pushed away the wine and dishes in front of him and spread them on the table. He raised his head and drank a big gulp of wine. Just when Gu Yenying thought that he was going to take advantage of the wine and write a lot of words, Li Qingshan began to eat. Li Qingshan began to bite the pen. Sometimes he frowned and thought. Sometimes he looked up to the sky and sighed. After a while, he actually drank wine and ate meat. Right. Gu Yenying couldn't help but urge. Can't you see that I'm thinking? Li Qingshan chewed the tough ape meat and said impatiently, but you're clearly eating. What would a woman like you know about the matters of the school of novels? Li Qingshan glared at her. Well, I don't understand. Uncle Li, please continue. Gu Yenying said, helplessly. She felt that he was not always reliable. However, she saw Li Qingshan wandering around the warm room with a pen in his mouth. He admired the snow outside the window and looked at the famous paintings on the wall. He almost fiddled with everything in the room before he sat down at the table again. He grabbed the pen awkwardly and suddenly said to Gu Yenying, "What do you think those guys outside look like when they practice swordsmanship?" "I don't know." Gu Yenying lay on the bed, holding a book called The Secret History of Wulin in her hand. She didn't even look at him. "Why don't we?" "I won't go." "I didn't say I wanted to read it. Write quickly." "Is this my novel or your novel?" Li Qingshan was angry. "Forget it. You can't write it anyway. Let's go out for a walk." Gu Yenying put down the book and smiled. "Who said I can't write it? I've almost finished the idea. I'll write it for you now." As a novelist, how could Li Qingshan endure such humiliation? He immediately began writing at a tremendous speed. His scrawling handwriting made Gu Yenying feel like laughing, but seeing his serious expression, she did not say anything. In any case, she would just help him rewrite it later. The howling of the wind and snow could be faintly heard through the window, which only served to accentuate the quietness of the pavilion. Occasionally, the fire in the stove would crackle. She propped her head up with one hand and thought about how many years it had been since she had been so free. Perhaps it had never happened since the day he was born. Regardless of the passage of time, he was not in a hurry to do anything. There was nothing to do anyway. Perhaps it was a very common feeling for mortals, but it was extremely precious to her. Those who were gazing into the distance naturally had no time to appreciate the scenery along the way. He did not know how long he had been daydreaming. The sound of Li Qingshan putting down his brush brought her back to reality. He smiled and asked, "Are you done?" "Of course." Li Qingshan proudly picked up a piece of paper. He handed it to Gu Yenying. "So little." Gu Yenying was slightly surprised. She felt that she had been daydreaming for at least 2 hours. "What did you think I was doing? Do you know what writing a novel is?" Li Qingshan roared as he slammed the table. "I was wrong." Gu Yenying felt her ears vibrate. Even though she was in the void, he was not so irritable. Perhaps he was really diligent in writing. She had no choice but to admit her mistake and lowered her head to read. Although the handwriting was difficult to decipher, she could still guess what it was. Her expression gradually became a little strange. In a short time after reading a page, she changed from frowning to finding it funny and then to sneering. Then she crumpled the novel in her hand into a ball and threw it on the ground. She smiled and said, "I was wrong." "Gu Yenying, what do you want to do?" Li Qingshan's angry roar could almost be heard even in the outer courtyard. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. When he killed Ho Hongtao with a single move, he was still calm. No one knew who could make him so angry and what the consequences would be. Just thinking about it made them feel terrified. Li Qingshan knelt on the ground and held the ball of blood that had been ravaged into a ball with both hands. He was extremely angry. Gu Yening shook her head and said seriously, Qingshan, no one will read this kind of thing. Even if it's mixed with martial arts secret manuals, people will only read the secret manuals. Li Qingshan's expression changed. He suddenly shrugged and said, Fine, I give up. Returning to the opposite bed, he lay flat on his back and continued to drink. Gu Yening was stunned and then smiled bitterly. Was this still the indomitable Li Qingshan she knew? Little, and is still the best. Little, and where are you? I can't live without you. Li Qingshan thought back to the good times he and Little and had spent together on Cloud Wisp Island. Back then he had written books, and she had written them. How harmonious they had been. Gu Yening could not sit still any longer. She got up and apologized. Uncle Li, don't be like this. I was wrong, okay? Why don't we think of something else? You're wrong. Think about it. Fine, I think. Gu Yening paced back and forth for a few steps and said, Since it's a biography of the White Ape King, as long as we understand more about his life experiences and connect the stories together, wouldn't we be able to write a book? I'm tired. You go find out. Li Qingshan turned around and turned his back to Gu Yening. Gu Yening rolled her eyes and called Yuan Feifei in. Chief Yuan, I heard that you've been following the White Ape King for many years. Just call me Feifei, Heights Lord. Calling me Chief is too much. Yuan Feifei glanced nervously at Li Qingshan's back. Just now, that angry roar had almost scared her to the point of wetting her pants. All right, Feifei, tell me about it. The more detailed, the better. Gu Yening nodded slightly. In terms of age, calling her Feifei was really not a big deal. Yuan Feifei began to tell her story, from stuttering to eloquent. She had always been an eloquent person, and the White Ape King loved to brag about its various experiences when it was drunk, so she could tell as many stories as she wanted. Gu Yening listened quietly. Seeing that Li Qingshan was also quietly pricking up his ears, she could not help but laugh. After listening for a while, Li Qingshan suddenly sat up and turned around, his face serious. Yuan Feifei turned pale with fright and fell to her knees, crying, Spare me, Heights Lord. Go on, who wants your life? Yes. She talked until the middle of the night, not daring to stop even when her mouth was dry. Gu Yening waved her hand. All right, you can go now. We'll talk about the rest tomorrow. Li Qingshan rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Seeing Gu Yening's tired face, he waved his hand to extinguish the light. It's getting late. You should rest too. Gu Yening lay down, closed her eyes, and held the rock feather in her palm, looking forward to the dream. Come and help me with my pen tomorrow. Li Qingshan suddenly said. This was Little Anne's job back then. Gu Yening opened her eyes and smiled. Sure, I'm a little flattered. After a moment of silence, she could not help but ask, Is it okay without Little? And of course not. Poor Little, and she must be very envious of me. Gu Yening closed her eyes again and changed to a more comfortable position. Those who are trapped here are the ones who are pitiful. Yeah, per Gu Yening. In any case, Li Qingshan's writing plan was finally restarted. To be continued. Chapter 1178. However, Gu Yening's food plan had failed. Although the ape meat was full of spirituality and had been meticulously cooked, the effect was only enough to make her teeth ache for a few days. As a result, most of it became Li Qingshan's side dishes, and his only comment was that it was very chewy. All the spirit energy in this world rejected them, refusing to be absorbed and dissolved. Thus, the power that had been exhausted in the endless void could not be recovered in the slightest. Only Li Qingshan could draw a little bit of power from the earth under his feet, but he could only recover pure power, and it was as difficult as fetching water from the desert. Fortunately, the writing plan went extremely smoothly. In terms of this world, the White Ape King's life could truly be described as grand and spectacular, and the caretaker of the rear courtyard, Yuan Feifei, was a very good storyteller. Most of the time, all Li Qingshan needed to do was write down what she said, and then Gu Yenying would polish it a little. In simpler terms, this novel actually had nothing to do with him. The part where he was truly useful was in terms of technique. The Great White Ape King's biography did not attract readers because of the exciting story or the real characters, but because of the white ape sword technique, which he was well versed in. In the book, the White Ape King would often have an epiphany, giving a long soliloquy, and finally saying, "This is the higher realm of swordsmanship." No matter how much the White Ape King drank, it would not reveal the mysteries of swordsmanship. Of course, this was all made up by Li Qingshan, but it was definitely clearer and more profound than the White Ape King himself. And this was after taking into account the acceptance of this world and deliberately taking care of this group of noobs. It was equivalent to a detailed educational version of the White Ape sword technique, except for the words essential for swordsmanship. As for the effect, it had been tested on Yuan Feifei. In fact, she did not have much talent for martial arts. In fact, she even lacked interest in martial arts. She had almost relied on the resources of the Ape Deity Mountain Villa to reach the Xian Tian realm. The Book of White Ape Swordplay was too abstruse and mysterious for her. She did not have the patience to finish reading every page of the Book of Swordplay that Gu Yenying published every day. It was not until she read Li Qingshan's novel that she suddenly felt enlightened. If the secret manual said that it was a shortcut to climbing the mountain, whether one could reach the top or not depended on whether the climber had the comprehension and perseverance to climb over the rocks and cut through the thorns. Li Qingshan, on the other hand, wrote down every rock and thorn that could possibly exist. He did not explain how to solve it. No one in the world had ever written a secret manual like this. Even when he was teaching his disciples, he would not be able to explain it in such detail. It was not that he was intentionally hiding it, or that the principles behind it were truly profound. It was because he didn't have the ability to do so. But in this way, this book was destined to be extremely long. Gu Yenying had also expressed her worry, but Li Qingshan said, "I purposefully made it so long so that I could gather 100 pages. When we have 100 pages, we will first publish the first book, then the second and third, turning this into a series of books. I think it would not be a problem to write dozens of books." Gu Yenying could not help but give him a thumbs up. When Li Qingshan wrote about swordsmanship, although it was extremely trivial, it was well organized and logical. It was far better than the stories he made up. The White Ape King thought that the White Ape sword technique was a vast ocean. "I think yours is the vast ocean." "Haha, you flatter me." "Watch as I drown this land with this ocean." At the same time, the villa was plunged into an unprecedented tension. Everyone had a sword in their hands and a few pages of sword manuals. Even the cook and the old maid were no exception, let alone the swordsman from the outer yard. They tried their best to reduce their sleep time, studying the sword manuals even when they were eating or going to the toilet. They did not even have time to practice. The speed of publishing 1 page a day was simply too fast. Except for a few innate masters, the others simply could not keep up with the speed. They could only study with all their might without sleep and rest. By the time they had published more than 10 pages, even the left and right protectors were overwhelmed. By the time there were 20 pages, 2 swordsmen had died from overwork. One had gone berserk while practicing, and another had jumped off a cliff in a frenzy. It was said that he was still shouting in midair, "It's fake! It's all fake!" The other swordsman at most found the time to say disdainfully, "Of course these idiots could not understand such a profound sword manual." Most of the swordsmen did not even notice what was happening outside. Walking in the villa, they often met swordsmen who had their hands on the hilt of their swords with a ferocious expression and were mumbling something. You thought they were coming to kill you, but in fact, if you bumped into them, they might not even be able to dodge. After a month, the swordsmen gathered in the main hall again, waiting for the 32nd page of the sword manual. They all had dull eyes and stretched their necks like a flock of ducks waiting to be fed. Although they were so full that their stomachs were about to explode, no one could resist eating. Some people suspected that this was a plot by the two villa masters to torture everyone to death. Every day, they swore that they would never look at the sword manual again. The time they swore was usually after they finished reading the latest page of the sword manual. "Welcome, Villa Master." In the midst of the weak voices, Li Qingshan and Gu Yenying arrived as scheduled. Compared to the dispirited swordsmen below, they looked very spirited. They looked at each other and smiled. Gu Yenying said, "During this period of time, everyone has worked hard. Seeing this makes our hearts ache. Therefore, for the sake of everyone's health, we have made a decision. Today's sword manual is gone." Everyone stared blankly for a moment. It took them a great deal of effort to regain their composure. Sparks flashed in their eyes as they were instantly enraged. Gone. How could it be gone? What happened to the complete book? "Shut up." Li Qingshan spat out these two words. Everyone was like ducks that had been grabbed by the neck. The place where the fierce flame sword marquis had been slapped to death still had a clear handprint. With a wave of his hand, he said, "Steward Yuan, bring the box over and let everyone broaden their horizons." Yuan Feifei carried a large box to the center of the hall. She carefully placed it down and gently opened it, revealing a pile of books. "Don't fight, don't fight. One book for everyone. There's one for everyone." Li Qingshan said. The swordsmen's eyes lit up again, and they immediately crowded around. What they saw was the grand biography of the White Ape King and the extremely eye-catching written by Li Qingshan. They all let out disappointed sighs. Holding back their disappointment, they took a closer look. There were also a few lines of introduction written on the cover. "This is the glorious life of a sword master. This is a long sigh after his sudden fall. The fierce flame sword marquis wholeheartedly recommended. The thing I regret the most is not being able to live to see this book come out." At the end, there were 4 bright red words. "Must read when learning the sword." The swordsmen's faces twitched as they silently cursed. "Wasn't the White Ape King personally killed by you? When did the fierce flame sword marquis say something like that? Regret is regret for not being able to live." But considering their fates, they still patiently took a book each and began to flip through it. To be continued. Chapter 1179. Everyone in the villa knew of the White Ape King's glorious past, so it was impossible to arouse their interest. However, after reading a few pages, they gradually realized something, and their eyes widened. Could this be? "I understand now," a young swordsman exclaimed. His strength was not yet at the innate stage, which was considered good for his age. However, both his experience and cultivation were insufficient to fully comprehend the White Ape swordplay. The more he read, the more confused he became, but he could not stop himself from reading. These days, he was on the verge of going berserk. As soon as he read the great biography of the White Ape King, he suddenly felt that all his doubts had been answered. The answer was so simple that it made him doubt whether it was true, but the calming of his inner force proved everything. So that's how it is. That's how it is. All the swordsmen understood. The book in their hands was not about the White Ape King, but about the White Ape swordplay. No, this is definitely not just about the white ape swordplay, but the ultimate way of the sword. The two protectors looked at each other, momentarily forgetting their competitive spirit, only incomparable amazement. Only they understood that this book was not just an annotation of the white ape swordplay. Behind the complicated and jumbled details, there was another set of understanding of the way of the sword. If one were to extract it, it would be enough to write a sword manual that was many times simpler than the white ape swordplay, but also many times more brilliant. The highest level of this sword technique was far beyond the limits of this world. It was like a heavenly steed soaring through the sky, difficult to reach. "How's the writing?" Li Qingshan asked. "Wonderful. It's like a long drought finally meeting rain. The Villa Master is wise. Sigh, if only my brother had read this book earlier. He would not have gone berserk. If he still can't understand this, then he must be blind or stupid." Everyone sighed with emotion, but they were also indescribably pleasantly surprised. If the experience of the past month was like a pie falling from the sky, then the current situation was like another invisible hand had broken this pie into pieces and fed it to them. The Villa Master's way of the sword is truly unfathomable. The right protector said, sincerely, "Yes, compared to you, the White Ape King is like a clown." The left protector did not fall behind. The title of Lord was originally given to the White Ape King. Now, it was given to Li Qingshan without hesitation. The two's eyes met. Neither side gave way. "I stopped cultivating the sword Tao a long time ago. I'm just fooling kids," Li Qingshan said frankly. The left and right protectors were unwilling to believe it, but they had no choice but to believe it. If such a sword Tao could only fool children, then what was their sword Tao? A fight between cats and dogs. Look at you two staring at each other. Weren't they just like children? The world was so vast, yet your vision is so narrow. Li Qingshan reprimanded in an imposing manner. Gu Yenying unfolded her iron fan and covered her mouth to snicker. This guy is so excited to scold a child, but he didn't seem like an adult either. We will definitely forget our past enmity in the future and wholeheartedly serve the ape deity manner. The left and right protectors had sincere expressions on their faces. At this moment, they not only put aside their disputes, but also the sex they came from and all sorts of entanglements. Since they had seen such a sword Tao, what was there to fuss about in the mundane world? Those who practiced the sword Tao never lacked a lonely heart. It's no longer appropriate to call this place the Ape Deity Manor. Your Highness, please give us a new name. Li Qingshan was a little moved, but he hesitated for a moment. A figure flashed in his mind. He waved his hand and said, "Didn't I want to broaden your horizons? It's just a plaque. What's the point of changing it?" "Yes, Your Highness." Li Qingshan stood up and raised his hands. "Very good. Everyone, answer me together. What's our slogan? Everyone has something to learn. Everyone has something to practice. Isn't this a good book?" "Yes." "Very good. Since it's a good book, you have to memorize it word for word. In the future, I will test you. If you can't memorize it, you won't be able to see the new sword manual." Li Qingshan's eyes shone brightly as if he was looking at a group of lambs waiting to be slaughtered. In the future, when this book spread around the world, he definitely wouldn't be able to ask everyone to memorize it. But who asked these guys to be in his territory? "Your Highness, we will definitely follow your orders." Everyone was overjoyed. They hadn't expected that they would be able to read a sword manual, and that there would be a peerless master helping to annotate it. As for memorizing the book, no one thought it was a big deal. Although this book was called a biography, it was only 100 pages long. At most, it was only a few tens of thousands of words. To be able to learn swordsmanship in the ape deity manner, which of them didn't have sharp ears and eyes? Moreover, besides the glorious history of the White Ape King, the book was full of exquisite martial arts theories. Even if no one asked them to memorize it, they would still have to memorize it. Only a few people noticed the last sentence of the book. To be continued. Even if they did notice it, they were filled with anticipation. They couldn't imagine what it meant. A trace of pity rose in Gu Yeniying's heart. That was dozens of books. No, this was only a conservative estimate. By the time the book was finished, there would probably be millions or even tens of millions of words. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but laugh. The hall fell silent, stunned by this moment of beauty. Gu Yenying immediately stopped smiling. As the saying went, femme fatale, she hoped that the heavens wouldn't find another source of trouble. Even if it couldn't do anything to them, it would still be troublesome. The two of them walked out of the hall. The snowstorm that had been falling for many days had finally stopped. In the ink-blue sky, a crescent moon, surrounded by a sky full of stars. The moonlight gilded the endless world of ice and snow with a layer of dazzling silver brilliance. The laws of the heavens were constant and moved according to the time. Even the will of the heavens could not create an endless snowstorm. Li Qingshan felt that the power of will in the divine talisman of great creation had begun to grow slightly. At this moment, he finally had a foothold in this world. He had survived the most difficult stage, and his mind was broadened. He couldn't help but laugh heartily. His loud laughter shook the eaves of the roof. One by one, the icicles fell down, each as sharp as a sword. Because of the momentum, they sped up and were strong enough to pierce through the skull. Li Qingshan waved his hand, and all the icicles shattered into dust. They flickered like silver dust and drifted away with the wind. From now on, even if the mysterious will of the heavens created an endless fire disaster, it wouldn't be able to do anything to him. The laughter gradually subsided, and Gu Yenying saw Li Qingshan standing motionlessly in the same place, frowning as if thinking about something. What's wrong? Nothing. Now that we have a basic guarantee, we need to work harder. Li Qingshan looked up at the sky, full of fighting spirit. Of course. Let's go back to the tower. I need to go into seclusion for a while and try to refine these Yao cores. Li Qingshan opened his palm, and the White Ape King's Yao core shone brightly, glowing with a metallic luster. Will it work? Gu Yenying had tried all kinds of elixirs and food during this time, but they all ended in failure. This was part of the imprisonment. Otherwise, this invisible shackle would be too easy to break. Perhaps the important thing isn't them. That you're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.